Chapter 1296. If he didn't have the front's secret art, this martial soul would have been too powerful and would have created a domain. However, he wouldn't have been able to control it, and it would have been extremely difficult to cultivate it. After thinking about it carefully, Wang Feng understood the cause and effect and couldn't help but be surprised. This theory was very much in line with his situation. One had to know that the angel of light and dark martial soul he inherited originated from the origin tribulation God King. This theory was correct, which meant that it was in line with the development of the world and belonged to the core rules of this world. It was just like the many theories of the major academic circles in his previous life. Amazing! Wang Feng sighed. He wasn't too interested in this research. Of course, if someone could research it, it meant that the world was moving forward. It wasn't the same. Why did the Federation reject soul tool technology and still focus on researching the secrets of martial souls? This was because martial souls were not only a tradition for soul masters, but also contained endless mysteries. The more they researched, the more they discovered that there was a huge hidden power. Why would they be interested in soul tool technology? We haven't even researched it thoroughly, so how would we have the time to research soul tool technology that is weaker than martial souls? It is amazing. The Douluo sighed softly. I'm worried that the soul demons might know about this because of the spiritual link. However, we know very little about them. Wang Feng knew what the Douluo was worried about. These theories were, in fact, public knowledge to the current human race. It wasn't a secret. However, if they knew about the soul demons of the dark demon realm, it would be easier for them to deal with soul masters. It's not as bad as you think. Wang Feng pondered for a few seconds. Due to some restrictions, the dark demon realm can't send out powerhouses that are far more powerful than the Douluo world. Those soul demons with 10 rings are already the limit. You have experienced the spiritual link, so you should know about this. With this foundation, they can't defeat humans no matter how much they know. I hope so. The Douluo nodded slightly. By the way, Senior, do you know that silver-haired woman? She seems to come from the great star Do forest. Why would she come to human society? It seems that she is most likely here to look for you. Her strength is extraordinary. Wang Feng couldn't explain the silver dragon's origins in detail. This was because it involved the God realm. The Douluo probably came here specifically for this. I'm here to remind you. Perhaps he had already seen through some clues. Wang Fengxin became even more vigilant. Long Xie was most afraid of this silver dragon. There was nothing he could do about it. Long Xie was like an illegitimate child. He had no status in the family. The silver dragon was a legitimate descendant and the number 1 successor. This illegitimate son was naturally more fearful of the chief successor. However, this illegitimate son of his had great talent and strength. Unfortunately, his background was too poor. Back then, the dragon god treated him like excrement and threw him away in disgust. It was no wonder that Long Xie didn't like the dragon god and his descendants. When he first appeared, he was still yelling that he wanted to kill Di Tian. Long Xie, the silver dragon must have recognized you and confirmed my identity. Wang Feng said, she definitely knows that my current strength is not that great, so she can easily deal with me. He was probably waiting for me so that he could deal with me properly during the tournament. Perhaps he'll even send someone to challenge me. Boss, are you afraid? Long Xie asked. Do you think I'm afraid? Ahem, what I mean is that you're afraid that she'll fall in love with you because you're too outstanding and handsome. You can't be afraid of her because of her strength. That makes sense. Say more in the future and I'll reward you. Wang Feng laughed as he walked out of the Spirit Mandate Pavilion. Boss is still the most thick-skinned, Long Xie exclaimed. He thought for a while before saying, it seems like I haven't graduated yet, the 8th day. Today was the day of the semifinals. There were 2 matches left. These 2 matches would determine the last 2 spots in the semifinals. Huoyu Hao and the others didn't compete yesterday, so they naturally had to compete today. Wang Feng arrived at the Hongyu Seoul dueling arena early. As a teacher, he had to watch his students' matches carefully. However, Huoyu Hao and the others were facing a formidable opponent today. It was unlikely that they could end the match as quickly as they did the last time. As for their opponents, they were from Purple Star College. They were the school that had the most essence of the 6 versus 1 style. They were from the Heaven-Do political district, and they were very strong. They had the potential to be champions. Wang Feng glanced over and saw a familiar figure among the teachers leading this battle group. Wu Xianghe. Wang Feng remembered him clearly. Why? Because Wu Xianghe was able to reach the level of a soul sage at rank 51. He was even close to the level of a soul Douluo. He was more than 20 ranks above him. Even now, when it wasn't rare to see someone of a higher rank, he was still very strong. The reason why Wang Feng had such a deep impression of Wu Xianghe was because of his martial soul and the accompanying technique. The Sky Ruin Sword and the Sky Ruin Spirit returning technique. Logically speaking, in the past 10,000 years, there had been a lot of amazing people born. However, Wang Feng felt that the person who had created the Sky Ruin Spirit returning technique was a true genius. This technique could rejuvenate a soul master according to the time he cultivated the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul. It could forcefully change a soul master's lifespan. The Sky Ruin Sword martial soul was formless and traceless. In the classification of tool martial souls, it was one of the top tool martial souls in the continent. It wasn't inferior to any other martial soul. However, this martial soul was too domineering. People with such a martial soul tended to have short lifespans, and their cultivation speed was very slow. Therefore, soul masters with the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul usually didn't have high ranks and didn't live for long. 60 to 70 years was the upper limit. However, it was very strong. Not only did this sword have frightening offensive strength, but it was also difficult for soul masters to detect it with their spiritual power. Its attacks were strange and tricky. Its speed was fast and its angles were tricky. It could kill enemies who were more than a few ranks above it. It wasn't inferior to the 7 Kills Sword, Clear Sky Hammer, and other veteran tool martial souls. It might even be superior. However, that was if those few flaws weren't there. This Sky Ruin Spirit returning technique solved the problem of the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul's short lifespan. There were many other powerful changes. It was as if it could change one's fate. However, it would cause a soul master to be in a divine illusory state for a period of time, and he would lose his fighting strength. Back then, Wu Xianghe even forced Qilin Lord Bingmu to use several soul skills. He even forced Wang Feng to do it himself. One could imagine how strong this martial soul was. Wu Xianghe was over 60 years old. He was rank 51. In terms of talent, those who were more talented had already become titled Dalu. De Mingluan wasn't even 50 years old. However, no one would underestimate Wu Xianghe when it came to the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul. One of the members of Purple Star College's team was Wu Xianghe's descendant. A person with the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul, and a young girl who was only rank 39. Furthermore, she was the core of Purple Star College's team. The other 6 were mostly above rank 40. That person even had a soul lock martial soul that was above rank 50. However, no one doubted Purple Star College's methods in the entire tournament. Wang Feng had seen a few of Purple Star College's victories. They were all very simple. End of chapter. Chapter 1297. Most of the time, it was this girl who took on an entire team by herself. In the previous round of 16, they'd used 3-1, allowing this Sky Ruin Sword Soul Master to crush all 7 of her opponents and win the competition. In the youth division, Purple Star College's popularity wasn't inferior to Shrek Academy's. This was mainly because Purple Star College's matches were extremely entertaining. At the same time, there was a certain amount of individual heroism. Of the 6-to-1, the one who stood out was naturally that person. Naturally, her popularity was extremely high. Furthermore, it was only concentrated on this Sky Ruin Sword Soul Master. The popularity of the others was very average. Like Shrek Academy, Purple Star College was also holding back. They didn't completely reveal their trump cards. Those who'd made it this far would basically leave behind a few songs. This is going to be a tough battle. Wang Feng shook his head. His gaze landed on the heavenly oasis Sword Soul Master. The Sky Ruin Sword Martial Soul was an extremely unique martial soul. To control this martial soul, one needed unimaginable perseverance, as well as a physique that far exceeded that of a soul master of the same rank. It was impossible for a soul master above rank 30 to withstand the soul force of 6 people. Whether it was his martial soul or his body, it was impossible for him to withstand it. The 6-to-1 seemed like a style that everyone was familiar with. However, there was only one school that could fully display the essence of this style. After all, there were very high requirements for each soul master. It wasn't something that could be tripped up by just a few people. Whether it was the 6 or the 1, the requirements were very high. Simply put, the upper limit was extremely high, and the lower limit wasn't low either. The Sky Ruin Sword was one of the most suitable martial souls for this style. As expected, a total of 7 people from Huoyu Hao's team went up. They didn't hold back. Other than Ma Xiaodao, Huoyu Hao, Wang Dong, Xiao Xiao, He Kaitu, Su Sanshi, Jiang Nannan, and Bei Bei all went up. They seemed to be the Shrek's 7 monsters of this era, right? Wang Feng looked at the 7 of them and thought for a moment. Ma Xiaodao didn't go up because her strength broke the rules. However, you might have underestimated this Sky Ruin Sword Soul Master. On the other hand, led by the Celestial Ruin Sword, the other 6 stood behind her in a protective formation. 6 great supports. One of them even came from the 9 Treasures Glazed sect. Most of the sects would send their disciples out to various universities to cultivate. After they finished their studies, they would return to the sect to continue their development. Therefore, the sects would usually send top experts to participate in the summit competition. The current sect was somewhat similar to the company in Wang Feng's previous life. Most of the sects would not participate in the youth division tournament. Only a small number of sects survived as academies. They would also register and send out their sect teams. Other than that, the rest are auxiliary-type soul masters. Colored Glass Guide, Jade Compass, Flying Star Bell. These support-type soul masters were purely tools. The only thing they could do was to use their soul power to strengthen the Sky Oasis Sword. After that, they would give the rest of their soul power to the Sky Oasis Sword through the Soul Master who was using the same soul lock as them. There was a match earlier. Ending it quickly was a bit of a trick. But this time, it won't be so easy. Wang Feng watched with interest. As the match began, it only took 10 seconds for the 5 support-type Soul Masters to complete their mission. It was so fast that the Shrek Academy's team had just finished preparing their formation. 10 seconds. Transferring the soul power of 6 Soul Masters to 1 Soul Master at the same time. Just the compatibility of this training alone is difficult for ordinary academies to accomplish. Wang Feng thought to himself, if it was a high-tier Soul Master, they could easily use these 10 seconds to interrupt it. This might be the only weakness of a 6 versus 1 formation. However, Purple Star College had already mastered this weakness. They would use all sorts of methods to shorten this time. They would shorten it to 10 seconds that no other team could interrupt. Even so, the Sky Oasis Sword was the core. She immediately revealed her martial soul and entered a powerful battle state. After 10 seconds, the 7 versus 1 formation was formed. However, the Purple Star team was also successful. The 6 tools retreated several dozen meters in unison, leaving the stage to the Sky Ruin Sword Soul Master in front of them. As a 7 versus 1 battle, The formation was very important. If Huiyuhao's team wanted to send someone to interrupt the match, they would definitely be attacked by the Sky Oasis sword. To be honest, none of the 7 of them were a match for this Sky Oasis sword. Only Huiyuhao's spiritual detection could slightly sense the Sky Oasis sword's attack. However, Huiyuhao's strength was not enough for him to fight one-on-one with the Sky Oasis sword. He had only learned the Tang Sect's ultimate skills for a year, so he could not rely on them to fight one-on-one with the Tang Sect's ultimate skills. They were far from enough. Little Three's skills and techniques were unique 10,000 years ago. With the Tang Sect's martial skills, he was able to turn danger into safety and defeat strong enemies many times. However, that was because soul masters of that era did not develop their martial souls well enough. 10,000 years later, if he could still rely on the Tang Sect's martial skills to achieve that kind of effect, it could only mean that the development of the Federation's soul masters over the past 10,000 years was in vain. It was undeniable that the Tang Sect's martial skills were still very powerful, but they were far from being as effective as Tang San back then. This was especially true against a strong martial soul like the Sky Oasis sword. A year ago, Huiyuhao and the rest saw the rank 51 Sky Oasis sword soul master from Purple Star College. Wu Xianghe seemed to be easily defeated by Wang Feng's soul-bonded beast and Wang Feng. However, they only realized how strong this martial soul was when they faced a Sky Oasis sword soul master. Just one sword was able to break through Su Sanqi's defense. Furthermore, it was a defense that was formed at the same time as the thorny tortoise. In the arena, that girl was wearing a battlesuit. From afar, she looked like a valkyrie on the battlefield. Her hands were empty. Her soul rings were all black. There were only 3 of them, but they were already extremely black. This was also one of the main characteristics of the Sky Oasis sword martial soul when used together with the Sky Oasis soul restoration technique. Soul rings had the ability to expand, and they had a certain level of self-improvement. As a soul master's rank increased, their soul rings would change, and they would be filled with possibilities. This was also the core of the word one. Otherwise, not every soul master could withstand the soul power of 6 soul masters. This sword could even break the ice that I condensed back then. Its destructive power is something that I have never seen before. Lin Lord Bingmu opened his mouth. Evidently, he had a deep impression of it. Furthermore, the Sky Oasis sword soul master was only rank 51 back then. This martial soul couldn't be measured by common sense. At rank 51, she could be considered a soul sage or even a soul Douluo. Back then, Lin Lord Bingmu only had 10,000 years of cultivation. It was different now. Therefore, even though Su Sanqi's Xuanwu martial soul was the strongest defense-type martial soul in the world, it was naturally difficult for the Sky Oasis sword to defend against it. After withstanding the soul power of 6 people, the girl was like a god of war right now. Without the cultivation of a soul emperor, no one dared to show her prowess. This was a true 6 versus 1 situation. This word, one, was unparalleled in the world. The Sky Oasis sword martial soul was indeed unparalleled in the world. At least for now. End of this chapter. Chapter 1298. The difference is too great. Wang Feng shook his head. Xiao Tao is the only one who can fight. Huiyuhao's spiritual detection and the silver-patterned silkworm's spiritual sharing can let everyone know where the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul is attacking. However, this little girl walked the upright path. She would break through your defense with a single sword strike right in front of you. You wouldn't be able to resist at all. Even if you know where her attack is coming from, it's useless. If you want to dodge, you have to be as strong as this little girl. She had been through a lot of training since she was young. Her physique was much stronger than ordinary people. Furthermore, she cultivated a special technique. Boss, are your students going to lose? Long Xie smacked his lips. Lose? Wang Feng thought for a moment. Judging from the current situation, they might really lose if they didn't have any tricks up their sleeve. This little girl can even break through the combined defense of the thorny turtle and Su Sanshur with a single strike. The rest of them couldn't possibly defend themselves against her. Perhaps the solution lies with her. Wang Feng's gaze landed on Jiang Nannan. The girl who possessed the sky-ruined sword martial spirit had an indifferent expression on her face. Her eyes were faintly purple, and it was obvious that she was a determined person. Xiao Xiao was playing a flute with all sorts of powerful negative effect. She even developed a resistance to it. It was as if she was already used to it. Soul masters from 10,000 years ago hadn't discovered the concept of resistance. Therefore, control-type soul masters were very powerful. They could not only suppress assault-type soul masters, but also agility-type soul masters, defense-type soul masters, and auxiliary-type soul masters. All types of soul masters were suppressed by control-type soul masters. However, it was different now. The concept of resistance only appeared 1,000 years after the Federation was established. During that era, control-type soul masters experienced an explosive growth. There were more and more control-type martial souls. The appearance of a large number of control-type soul masters caused the Federation's soul master world to suffer. All sorts of strange control-type martial souls caused many soul masters to complain incessantly. However, it was under such circumstances, after a few decades, many soul masters suddenly realized that the effects of control-type soul masters' soul skills seemed to be weakening. At first, they thought it was a problem with control-type soul masters. However, they soon realized that it wasn't a problem with control-type soul masters. Instead, it was their bodies that, after countless years of control and generations of changes, had actually developed adaptability. This adaptability was resistance. With this as a foundation, the world of soul cultivators began to research it. In the end, he discovered and confirmed that the effects of a control-type soul master's soul skill could weaken as the soul master adapted to it. At the same time, resistance was further divided into elemental resistance, physical resistance, mental resistance, and so on. This was a very simple principle. For example, if you lived in a high-temperature environment, your skin would have a high resistance to fire. Any fire-type control-type soul skill will have a much weaker effect on you. For example, if you often live in a high-noise environment, your mind will bear the impact of the noise from all angles, and your mental resistance will be extremely high. If that's the case, control-type soul masters will be less effective against you. Physical resistance was related to a soul master's physical constitution. For example, he could make his skin loose and smooth, which could weaken the restraints of many plant types. Of course, this required a long period of cultivation. It was not something that could be developed overnight. Among them, whether or not he could persevere was the most important. It was not something that ordinary people could do. But once you could do it, the threat that control-type soul masters posed to you would be greatly reduced. This was purely using one's body to adapt to it, allowing one's body to develop a resistance. Of course, there were also genetic factors. This completely depended on the family. However, the strength of control-type soul masters' soul skills had also gradually increased with the changes of time. It was not enough to rely on genetic factors alone. Now that things had developed to this point, apart from these few situations, one could also consume many resistance medicines to increase one's resistance. However, these medicines mostly had side effects on the body and were more expensive. The price ratio was not high, and most soul masters would not use them except under special circumstances. There were also heavenly treasures, which were even rarer and could only be found by chance. After gaining resistance, control-type soul masters were finally no longer able to suppress all other types. The number of control-type soul masters returned to normal. They were also no longer able to suppress heaven and earth. This was because many assault-type soul masters would consciously go through all sorts of training to increase their body's resistance. This was to prevent them from being completely suppressed by control-type soul masters on the battlefield. From then on, they would be crushed in all sorts of ways. Of course, the specific situation still depended on the martial soul and soul power rank. Evidently, this girl who possessed the Skyruin sword martial soul was very resistant to Xiao Zhao's control-type soul skill. This was especially true now that her aura was extremely strong, her soul power was abundant, and her soul rings were powerful. She could even greatly reduce Xiao Zhao's control. Her spiritual resistance was extremely high. This was especially true for Xiao Zhao's second martial soul, the Three Lives Soul Crush Cauldron, which had a strong control ability that reduced the effects of the stun by half. The first time, the girl had even used the Skyruin sword's high-speed reaction to send him flying. It could only be said that the difference between them was too great. This girl destroyed the formation that Huoyu Hao and the others had set up, as if she had no one to stop her. Not a single one of them was her match. This was the reason why the 6 guarantees had been so popular back then. It could be said that she was invincible. The only thing that could resist her was the combined attacks of soul beasts. Huoyu Hao and Wang Dong's martial soul fusion skills could also resist her. Hikadu's barrier movement soul tool that he was so proud of using his amethyst rhinoceros could only obstruct the girl's advance. Fortunately, they were able to expend some of their energy after resisting so many attacks. However, they were still far from being able to defeat this Skyruin sword martial soul. Jiang Nannan, what's your second martial soul? Wang Feng stared at Jiang Nannan. He had discovered Jiang Nannan's second martial soul long ago, but he didn't know what it was. Jiang Nannan was the first to fight in Huoyu Hao's match. Her soft bone rabbit martial soul and golden light owl martial soul weren't very effective against the Skyruin sword martial soul. In that case, there wasn't much point for her to fight. She was different from the others, who more or less had a certain level of resistance. What was Jiang Nannan's use? What was her second martial soul? Wang Feng could guarantee that Jiang Nannan had never used it before. Finally, she was the only one left in the arena. Wang Feng received her approval. Dark Devil Chi? Wang Feng was shocked as he looked at Jiang Nannan, who was standing in the arena. At this moment, the fight between the two teams had reached its climax. The 6 guarantees and the Skyruin sword martial soul were already imprinted in everyone's mind. However, this wasn't surprising. Although the Skyruin sword was rare, it wasn't unheard of. On the contrary, many people didn't think the Shrek Academy would win before the match. They were able to resist this girl's attacks, partly because of the soul bonding beast, but mostly because of their own abilities. Although Su Sanshur and the Thorny Tortoise's defenses had been broken, they hadn't completely lost their ability to fight. At this point, other than Jiang Nannan, who hadn't made a move yet, the rest of the team had used everything they had. Whatever they could do, they did. Jiang Nannan was the only one left, but she still affected many people's hearts. When a streak of black light exploded from Jiang Nannan's body, Wang Feng felt it. It was Dark Devil Chi. A shadow shone from Jiang Nannan's body. It was her second martial soul. Wang Feng's eyes widened. Jiang Nannan's second martial soul was the evil soul beast. Author's note: it's still 5 chapters today, but it's almost 6. End of chapter. Chapter 1299. The illusory figure floating above Jiang Nannan was a scarlet-red evil soul beast. It had 9 bone claws on its back, a black crown on its head, a ferocious face, and an extremely terrifying aura. The phantom was very faint, but one could tell at a glance that it was an evil soul beast. It only had 1 soul ring. This was a real evil soul beast. Judging from its aura, it couldn't be wrong. The words, "Evil Soul Master," appeared in countless people's minds. This was because the two were bound together in the first place. This is not an ordinary evil soul beast, Wang Feng had a complicated look in his eyes. The other soul masters only thought that Jiang Nanan's martial soul was an evil soul beast. However, a small number of high-grade soul masters who had seen soul demons would know. Jiang Nanan's martial soul was not just an evil soul beast, but a soul demon. A soul demon from the dark demon realm. They had been born from the eggs of evil soul beasts and wreaked havoc in the soul beast forests and outside of human cities. For example, the extreme north was a disaster area. This little girl clearly has a second martial soul, but she has never used it or even shown it. She didn't use it even once in the Shrek Academy, nor did she mention it. I'm afraid she doesn't have a good impression of her second martial soul. She doesn't dare to use it and talk nonsense. Wang Feng looked to the other side, where Mu En was. As invited guests of the competition, Mu En and Elder Xian were only in the spectator seat. Wang Feng could see with his own eyes that the old guy's expression seemed calm, but there was a slight change. Obviously, he didn't expect this. At the same time, Hu Hao and the others were also a little stunned. Wang Feng could see the expression on each of their faces clearly. Amidst the astonishment, there was a hint of realization, and a little worry. This meant that they might have some guesses about Jiang Nanan's second martial soul, but they didn't expect it to be like this. A soul demon as a martial soul, Wang Fengxin said. Jiang Nanan's origin was probably not simple. This soul demon martial soul was a little different from the martial souls Wang Feng had encountered before. Its size seemed much smaller, but its aura was stronger, and there were subtle differences. As the regular combat power of the dark demon realm, the soul demons had a clear hierarchy, but the weakest was a 9-ring soul demon, which could easily match the combat power of a top Douluo. A 10-ring Douluo could easily crush a 10-ring Douluo. There was no need to talk about his strength. As a martial soul, it was definitely not weak. But where did her martial soul come from? Inheritance? If it was an inheritance, then wouldn't Jiang Nanan's parents be from the dark devil world? However, Jiang Nanan's family background was very ordinary. Her father had passed away early and she only had one mother. Her family background was not very complicated. It had nothing to do with the dark devil world. If it wasn't an inheritance, then Jiang Nanan's martial spirit. Wang Feng thought of a few possibilities, but he still felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Maybe she doesn't even know what her martial spirit is. Damn it, she even has a domain. Wang Feng suddenly thought. However, the dark aura of this martial soul was too dense, causing her to think that this martial soul was ominous. It was easy for people to think that she was an evil soul master, so she didn't want to reveal it to anyone. Jiang Nanan, who was in the arena, was enveloped in a crimson aura as the martial spirit possessed her. A black golden light flickered in his eyes as his aura soared. This kind of aura was so condensed that it was almost tangible. It was a kind of aura field, and the aura field was the embryonic form of a domain. In other words, the current Jiang Nanan already had a domain. This meant that the will of her martial spirit was far stronger than her spiritual power. Thus, a domain was formed, even if it was only an embryonic form. From afar, she looked like a goddess of death who had crawled out of hell. If this had been in his previous life, it would have attracted many fans. However, many people were silent now. However, the girl with the sky-ruined sword martial spirit had a very good temperament. After a few seconds of astonishment, she had already recovered from her shock. Then, the two collided. After being possessed by the pure gold black-crowned soul demon, Jiang Nanan was really like a god descending to the mortal world. The sky-ruined sword, whose offensive power was stronger than the 7 kills sword, was actually unable to break through Jiang Nanan's defense. Moreover, every attack of Jiang Nanan's was supported by the 9 bone spurs on her back made of soul power. It was equivalent to having a large range of multiple attacks, and it was very powerful. Not only that, after being possessed by the soul demon, Jiang Nanan's speed was also very fast. She was only slightly slower than the girl. One had to know that this girl was the core of the 6 guarantees, and she bore the soul power of 6 people. What surprised Wang Feng the most was Jiang Nanan's golden head owl. The golden head owl was a relatively ordinary soul beast. Its superior, the Vajra dragonhawk, was a truly rare soul beast. In the previous battle, Jiang Nanan and his golden head owl could only be regarded as harassing the opponent. It was not considered as causing any damage. Although they had excellent cooperation, when the difference in strength was too great, the soul contract master could not directly defy the heavens. Unless this golden head owl was a divine beast. But now, this golden head owl had started to change along with Jiang Nanan's transformation. It mutated? Wang Feng was shocked. Apparently, the golden head owl had also changed. There were a few more red feathers on its golden head, and the yellow feathers had turned black. It was filled with a cold aura. This golden head owl was very special. It had dared to fight Long Xie as if it was not afraid of death. "Io, boss, this little owl seems to have become stronger," Long Xie immediately shouted in the soul realm. "I haven't bullied this little thing for a long time. I didn't expect it to not only become this little girl's soul contract beast, but also mutated, boss. What's wrong with this little girl?" "How would I know?" "You should know. I remember this little girl has feelings for you, right? Even if she loves me to death, does it have anything to do with me knowing her situation?" "Boss, if I use the words of you humans, you're an old scumbag." Long Xie laughed. "Get lost," Wang Feng scolded with a smile. At most, Jiang Nanan only felt admiration for him. How could Wang Feng care about that? The number of girls who admired him was innumerable. One martial spirit city was not enough to contain all of them. As for those few students, Wang Feng simply waved his hand after bringing them in. Why would he care so much about them? Not to mention Jiang Nanan. Jiang Nanan's martial spirit must have caused the life-soul contract to change, which caused the golden head owl to mutate. It might have become similar to the evil soul beast, but it won't lose its consciousness. Wang Feng pondered for a few seconds as he observed the changes in the battlefield. Because the golden head owl's aura and strength did not match its bloodline. With the soul demon as the martial spirit and the golden head owl's mutation, Jiang Nanan's strength had skyrocketed. In addition, the girl with the celestial ruins sword had defeated the other members of Shrek's team, but she had consumed a lot of energy. End of chapter. Chapter 1300. After a short while, Jiang Nanan gained the upper hand. At this point, Wang Feng knew that the results of the match were out. Although the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul was strong, Jiang Nanan wasn't weak either. Furthermore, she had the help of the mutated Golden Light Owl and a weak domain. The girl with the Sky Ruin Sword martial soul was gradually losing. After a few minutes, she admitted defeat only when she had no soul power left. Both girls were injured when the match ended. What was worse was that Jiang Nanan's martial soul disappeared the moment the girl admitted defeat. She fainted and lost consciousness. In a split second, the square was completely silent. Even though Shrek's team had won, no one cheered for them. It was very strange. The reason was simple. Many people thought that Jiang Nanan was an evil soul master. However, the definition of an evil soul master was no longer based on martial souls. As the saying went, if it's righteous, it's righteous. If it's evil, it's evil. This principle was set by the Angel Sacred Hall for evil soul masters. No one cheered, but no one was excited either. Most of them were waiting for the Federation to give them a detailed report. After all, something like this needed to be confirmed by the Federation's officials. Once the match ended, Wang Feng immediately stood up and planned to go to the Shrek Academy's lounge. He couldn't care less now. He had to go. This matter was very important. Jiang Nanan wasn't his student, but she was still a soul charmer. In the Shrek's lounge. "Why didn't you tell me that Jiang Nanan had a second martial soul before you came?" Wang Yan's voice was a little hoarse. He looked at them with shock and anger. Nan only told us before this match that she had a second martial soul. Xiao Xiao whispered. She said that her second martial soul was very strong. Once she used it, she could turn the tide of the battle. However, we didn't expect her martial soul to be an evil soul beast. Wang Yan took a deep breath. These kids were the youngest and most talented soul masters in Shrek Academy's cohort. The Academy sent them to the youth division to accumulate experience and broaden their horizons. They wanted to spread the word about soul charmers and nurture them in the future. There were so many powerful disciples in Shrek's inner courtyard, and many of them were under the age of 23. Why would they send a bunch of soul masters in the 20s and 30s to participate in the tournament? With the strength of these children and Ma Xiaotao, it was enough for them to reach the top 4. With actual combat experience and broadened knowledge, the Academy's goal of nurturing them had been achieved. It was impossible for him to become the champion. There were simply too many powerful academies in the Federation. Shrek Academy was the #1 academy on the continent, but it was impossible for them to become champions in every continental advanced Soul Master tournament. There were too many strong enemies, and all kinds of fighting styles were prevalent. There was no such thing as an invincible team. It wasn't that easy to become the champion. The youth division was held once every 5 years, and in the eyes of all the young soul masters on the continent, it was the greatest honor of their youth. Everyone wanted it. A team of soul masters in the 20s and 30s wanted to win the championship? Did they not see the other academies as people? Are you dreaming? Shrek Academy's plan was to let Huoyu Hao's team of 7 understand the fighting styles of the various academies and experience the strength of the various sects and academies, as well as the powerful martial souls they possessed. They would then fight for the championship in the next tournament. Huoyu Hao's team's intention was very clear. They wanted to become the champion. They wanted to keep Ma Xiaotao as their trump card. Otherwise, Ma Xiaotao would be the most reliable way to win this round. However, the possibility of them losing the next semifinals was very high. This was because they naturally had to hold their trump card in their hand. The other academies weren't fools. They would naturally think of ways to target Ma Xiaotao. The academies that had fought until now were all experts among experts. Once they were targeted, it would be very difficult for Ma Xiaotao to continue winning, even if she was extremely strong. That's why you let her fight without even knowing what her second martial soul is. Do you really trust her that much? Wang Yan looked at these children and sighed softly. Nan said that she wants to win too. Wang Dong thought for a moment and said in a low voice, furthermore, she must have mustered a lot of courage to use her second martial soul, right? Then do you know how many rumors and slanders she'll bring to the academy once she uses her martial soul? How much trouble will it cause? Wang Yan's expression was complicated. So much so that you'll be disqualified? Isn't it just an evil soul beast? Su Sancher frowned. Nan has never used her martial soul to do anything bad. Even the people from the Angel Sanctuary wouldn't think that she's an evil soul master, right? This isn't a few thousand years ago. It's not that simple. Wang Yan shook his head. Just as he finished speaking, a group of soul masters wearing golden armor filed in from outside the door. These soul masters had a pair of special flying-type soul tools on their back. On their golden armor, there was an image of an angel holding a holy sword. Their bodies emitted a pure and holy aura. They were the people from the Angel Sanctuary. The Angel Sanctuary was the only place of inheritance in the Federation. It had a very high status in the Federation. It wasn't a sect, an academy, or a clan. Instead, it was a special organization in the Federation. Their duty was to eliminate all evil on the continent. They didn't have to care about anything else, even if it was related to war. 10,000 years ago, before the Federation was established, it was changed by the Elder Hall of the Martial Soul Hall. Its status was very special. It was directly under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly King Feather, and was also an institution of the Federation. For example, the soul demons in other soul beast forests were mainly eliminated by the Angel Sanctuary in cooperation with many different departments of the Federation. Because the three heavenly kings had gone to the extreme north, the Angel Sanctuary didn't send any extra personnel. They only sent an investigation team formed by other departments of the Federation. This was because most of the people from the Angel Sanctuary had gone to other soul beast forests. Holy Feather Guard. This was the name given to the people in the Angel Sanctuary by the outside world. Most of their martial souls were light-type martial souls. Who's in charge? The leader of the Holy Feather Guard walked out and glanced at everyone. He first took out a beast skin document. This is an evil detention certificate. Take a look. We're taking Soul Master Jiang Nanan away. We'll carry out an investigation. Hearing this, everyone held their breath. Normally, an arrest certificate was signed by the investigations department, while a detention certificate was signed by the investigations department. However, an evil detention certificate was only reported by the Angel Sanctuary to the Federation's Martial Soul Palace, and then signed by several heavenly kings. It had a lot of power. Wang Yan stood out, cold sweat dripping down. Evil detention. From the two words, it was obvious that a soul master had a high chance of becoming an evil soul master. Furthermore, there were obvious signs of it. Only then would the Angel Sanctuary report it to the Martial Soul Palace and get a heavenly king to sign a certificate. Then, the person would be brought back to the Angel Sanctuary for a series of investigations. End of chapter. Chapter 1301. Even if she was a titled Douluo, she couldn't resist and had to be taken away. Furthermore, the fact that he had issued this proof meant that this person was an evil soul master. She wouldn't necessarily die, but she would be baptized by the light in the Angel Sacred Hall if she couldn't turn back into a soul master. In that case, the final judgment would be based on what that person had done. If she had committed too many sins and couldn't be saved, she would be humanely destroyed. If she had committed fewer sins, the best outcome would be to turn back into a soul master. If she couldn't turn over a new leaf, she would be locked up in the Angel Sacred Hall for life. This was still considered good. The Angel Sacred Hall had been developing for countless years. It wasn't like before, when anyone who had anything to do with evil soul masters would be killed and corrected. Now that the system had changed, the Angel Sacred Hall wasn't as strict as before, and they were even willing to redeem evil soul masters. However, it wasn't a good thing for a 15-year-old girl to be judged by the light in the Angel Sacred Hall. Jiang Nanan's martial soul was very special. This Lord Holy Feather Guard, she's only a student of the Shrek Academy. She's only 15 or 16 years old, and this is her first time using this martial soul. She's never used it before, and she hasn't done anything bad. Wang Yan scanned the door and realized that there wasn't anyone else. He was a little disappointed, but he immediately said, "She's injured and unconscious now. We shouldn't be suspicious of this evil detention certificate, but can we wait until after the tournament?" "Do you think we don't know?" The Holy Feather Guard said. "The Angel Sacred Hall will help her recover. As for whether this is her first time using her martial soul, we'll know when we go to the Angel Sacred Hall. She hasn't done anything bad, or she would be in the Angel Sacred Hall now. Do you think she'll still participate in the tournament?" His tone was very calm, but it carried a strong sense of authority. Evidently, this Holy Feather Guard wasn't a simple person. What a joke. There were so many people watching the tournament, and many people waiting for the result. The Holy Feather Guard who was here to deal with this matter couldn't be weak. When Wang Yan heard this, he knew that there was no way he could avoid this. "No, I can't let you take Nan Nan away," Huo Hao said as he stepped forward. "She's still a student of the academy. If you want to take her away, shouldn't you ask Elder Xian first?" The narrator and the others were stunned and thought to themselves, "That's right. Shrek Academy wasn't an ordinary academy. Xianzi and Mu En were both the most powerful individuals in the world, and there were even two of them. How could he take them away without their consent? Little kid, do you think Heavenly King Taotai and the dragon god Douluo don't know that we've obtained the evil detention certificate signed by Heavenly King Douluo? Can they stop it? The Holy Feather Guard said with a smile that was not a smile. You are still young. You don't understand what the martial spirit Jiang Nan used just now means. Isn't it just an evil soul beast? Wang Dong stood up and raised his head. His tone was very stubborn. Besides, Nan has been with us for so long. We naturally know what kind of person she is. There's no need for you to test her. Ha ha ha! The Holy Feather Guard laughed and said, Little girl, do you know about the latest incident involving evil soul masters? I tell you, it was a little girl who stabbed her father with a dagger. Of course, there are other reasons for this. However, evil soul masters often don't know what they're doing when they're used by others. Let's not talk about the fact that you've only been together for a year or a few months. Even if you've been together for 10 years, it's only a matter of time before you're betrayed and hurt if your friends get involved with evil soul masters. When that happens, do you know what's the most frustrating thing? Wang Dong was a little stunned by his words. He could only stutter, What? The most frustrating thing is that if your friend dies because of this, you don't even know if you should attend his funeral. Wang Dong was stunned as he looked at the Holy Feather Guard. He was momentarily speechless. Take him away. The Holy Feather Guard looked at everyone and waved his hand. What a joke. With his status and abilities, how could he be troubled by a few kids? Wait. At this moment, an elder slowly walked in. He was holding a drumstick in his hand. He was like an illusion as he flashed in without a sound. He appeared in front of Hui Yuhao and the others. Come back a day later to take him away. It was Xianzi. Elder Xian wiped the oil off his mouth and looked at the Holy Feather Guard. A day later? The Holy Feather Guard furrowed his brow. Elder Xian, you're a senior. Do you have Heavenly King Yu's approval? Without his approval, I'm sorry, but we can't give you even an hour. I'm sure you know what that martial soul is and what it's related to. If old Yu agreed, would I still be here? Elder Xian scolded. I'm doing this for the good of the Angel Temple. The Angel Temple can't deal with this little girl's martial soul. Old Yu is too stubborn. Let him think it through. Look at how many titled Douluo have died at his hands. I know you want to bring her back for research. You don't have bad intentions. You're doing this for the safety of the Federation. However, I'm sorry, but I can't give her to you. Even if you want to research her, the Shrek Academy will do it ourselves. The Holy Feather Guard's face turned gloomy. Elder Xian was very sloppy at the start, but his words were very intimidating. The aura of a rank 98 titled Douluo wasn't just for show, even if it was concealed. The Holy Feather Guards didn't move. The scene was a little stiff. You old thing, you're really stubborn. At this moment, an arrogant voice sounded. You asked Mu En to hold me back while you ran back to stop the people from the Angel Temple. It's a good plan. I think you don't know the seriousness of this matter. If we let you research her, what will you research with? How many times have you fought with the Soul Demon? Your academy only has a dozen titled Doulu. Do you think you're dead enough to research her? The Angel Temple specializes in dealing with such evil demons. Do you think we can't deal with her? Who else can solve it? As soon as the voice sounded, the Holy Feather Guards stepped aside. Behind him, a middle-aged man in a golden robe with an incomparably dignified face walked straight in. Mu En and the other heavenly kings were with him. The moment these people entered, the lounge seemed to have turned into a sacred place. This was the first time Hui Yuhao and the others saw these heavenly kings at such a close distance. They were intimidated by their auras and didn't dare to speak. It's time for the Shrek Academy to change your tradition of protecting your own. Heavenly King Yu glared at Elder Xian. Xianzi didn't show any weakness. His gaze landed on Mu En. Mu En was silent. Seeing this, Elder Xian knew that this matter was troublesome. Jiang Nanan's matter wasn't simple. End of chapter. Chapter 1302. Take her away. Heavenly King Yu glanced at the holy feather guards. The more we leave, the more dangerous it will be. The holy feather guards nodded slightly. Seeing this, Huo Hao and the others looked at each other and seemed to see the fear in each other's eyes. No matter how slow they were, they knew that Jiang Nanan's second martial soul was not as simple as an ordinary evil soul beast. It would be difficult to change the situation. The three female holy feather guards walked into the resting room and placed Jiang Nanan on a special soul tool. This soul tool was rectangular, and there was a gem burning with golden flames in each of the four corners. The interior emitted a pure light aura, and there were several restraining devices that could bind the person lying on it. Once lying on it, the soul power would be restricted. However, when Jiang Nanan lay on it and was carried out, shadows flashed from her body. At the same time, her face and arms were covered with special black patterns that looked like earthworms. It was terrifying and painful. Spirit-purifying tools don't seem to be able to suppress this kind of martial soul. The three holy feather guards looked very serious. It's normal. Heavenly King Yu glanced at Jiang Nanan and frowned. Bring her back to the headquarters. Huo Hao and the others watched as the holy feather guards carried Jiang Nanan away. They opened their mouths, but didn't know what to say. At this moment, "Wait, let me see her first." A voice suddenly sounded from outside. Everyone was stunned. "Teacher?" Huo Hao looked at the person and immediately recognized Wang Feng's voice. Wang Feng felt that he was fast enough, but he didn't expect the Federation to be even faster. One could imagine how important this was. There was no way not to. This martial soul was a soul demon. The appearance of the soul demon had not been fully announced, and many of the soul beast forests were sealed. They only said that the evil soul beasts were rampaging. The news of the dark demon realm was too shocking, and most people didn't know about it. Wang Feng walked in front of the three holy feather guards. However, the three holy feather guards didn't give way. "Who are you? You think we'll let you see just because you said so? Let this senior see." Heavenly King Yu immediately waved his hand. The leader of the holy feather guards was stunned, but he still gave the three holy feather guards a look. The three divine feather guards hurriedly scattered. Heavenly King Yu's words scared them so much that they broke out in a cold sweat. Huo Hao and the others were also scared out of their wits. Wang Feng stepped forward and glanced at Jiang Nanan. "TSK, this soul demon doesn't have a consciousness. Is it really just a martial soul? It's just that his aura is too pure. It's far from that of a real soul demon, but he's indeed a soul demon." Wang Feng mumbled, "Where did this little girl's martial spirit come from?" Wang Feng was 100% sure that this was the soul demon. Furthermore, after using it once, Jiang Nanan's soul power was almost converted into dark demonic energy. The agitated black patterns on his body were a manifestation of the transformation. Jiang Nanan was right not to use this martial soul, because this martial soul wasn't something she could control. This martial soul was obviously the soul of an immature soul demon, and it was no ordinary soul demon. After fusing with Jiang Nanan's body, it slowly changed over time and became her martial soul. The situation was somewhat similar to that of the little girl from before. However, because the little girl was weaker than the soul demon, and the soul demon's soul was extremely powerful, it could easily control the little girl and directly fuse with her soul. This made it difficult for others to discover. Even the Heavenly King of Stars couldn't discover it if his spirit hadn't entered the little girl's soul. Jiang Nanan's soul demon, on the other hand, was an immature soul demon. Its soul was incomplete and did not have a consciousness. After fusing with Jiang Nanan for a long time, it formed this special situation and became her martial soul. If it was used, it would be a natural golden finger in terms of the level of life, soul demons were much stronger than those on the Douluo continent. As a martial soul, it was no longer comparable to a top martial soul. However, even so, with Jiang Nanan's current strength, it was still fine if she didn't use it. Once she used it, she was too weak and was very likely to be devoured by this martial soul. In the end, she might even become a real soul demon. The Angel Sanctuary's worries were not unreasonable. They might not understand this situation. However, the strength of the soul demon and the hidden crisis in the Federation made the Angel Sanctuary not let it go easily. Muan must have known this, so he acquiesced. Everyone was silent. Wang Feng watched for a while. The Angel Sanctuary couldn't kill the soul demon, but could only suppress it. Back then, the Heavenly King of Stars, with his powerful spiritual power, couldn't kill the soul of the soul demon. Even the Angel Sanctuary couldn't do it. They could only suppress it. But the final effect of suppression was to make the soul demon immune. Because if you couldn't kill it, it would make it stronger. In the end, it might raise a monster, which was even more dangerous. Even if they killed Jiang Nanan herself, it would be useless if they didn't destroy her soul. Moreover, the incomplete soul of this soul demon had fused with Jiang Nanan over time. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared in the form of a martial soul. So it was useless to kill it. It's a little tricky, Wang Fengxin muttered. He could use the power of redemption to restore Jiang Nanan. But unlike the little girl's soul and the soul demon's soul were not completely fused, and the fusion time was very short. But Jiang Nanan was different. Her soul was half human and half soul demon. He couldn't use the power of redemption to annihilate the soul of the soul demon, but he could purify it. But the consequence of purification was that Jiang Nanan's soul would also be purified. Because the fusion time was too long, it was impossible to separate it. Her soul would be purified directly, and everything would disappear. But then, Jiang Nanan would no longer be the original Jiang Nanan. Simply put, it was equivalent to reformatting the system and then reinstalling it. At that time, Jiang Nanan would be equivalent to a life that didn't know anything. Everything would have to start from scratch. It was too cruel. It was no different from killing her. Especially there was another problem. Her second martial soul was too powerful, and Jiang Nanan had already produced an aura, which was the embryonic form of a domain. It seemed powerful, but from this it could be seen that she couldn't control her martial soul at all. Her future cultivation path, even if it didn't affect her first martial soul, would be very difficult. The only way to solve the problem was to make Jiang Nanan stronger, so that she could use this martial soul. Unfortunately, she used this martial soul too early. Not using it was the right thing to do. Boss, this child might have accidentally eaten the egg of that evil soul beast. At this moment, Lin Lord Bing Mu suddenly said, "The egg of the evil soul beast contains the soul of a soul demon." The dark demon realm used the evil soul beasts to place it in various parts of the Douluo continent through the war. It absorbed the life of the soul beasts and the origin energy of heaven and earth to breed it. But it only finished breeding in the past few years. If it was 10 years ago, the egg definitely wouldn't have finished breeding, and the soul would definitely be incomplete. It's possible that it was eaten by someone by mistake. Makes sense. Wang Feng was slightly startled. He agreed with this statement. End of chapter. Chapter 1303. But what about her? Wang Feng thought for a moment. With his methods, he could teach Jiang Nanan the front secret character. He could let Jiang Nanan cultivate the front secret character to strengthen her soul and spiritual power and increase her control over her martial soul. Or, he could find some other spiritual power cultivation methods for Jiang Nanan to cultivate. That would work too, but it wouldn't be as strong as the front secret character. The effect would be obvious. Wang Feng had once taught the front secret character to Bibidon, Ning Rongrong, and the others. It wasn't a big secret. But, thinking of this, Wang Feng already had a plan in mind. He stood up and looked at King Yu. Her situation is more complicated. Hand her over to me first. I'll tell you the details of the situation when the time comes. How can we do that? The Holy Feather Guard frowned slightly. Although she's a soul contract master, she's in extreme danger now. It has nothing to do with the soul contract master. Even if it does, you have no right. Halfway through, King Yu suddenly waved his hand and interrupted him. This Holy Feather Guard clearly knew some of Wang Feng's identity. He knew that Wang Feng was the founder of Soul Contract Masters. After all, they had already competed for several rounds. But he didn't know anything else. Since that's the case, I'll leave her to Senior. King Yu smiled. By the way, Senior, you can come to the Angel Sacred Hall when you're free. Xin Yu, take your men and leave first. The Holy Feather Guard opened his mouth and glanced at Wang Feng. He still didn't understand why King Yu was so respectful to this man. Don't talk about him. Even Huoyu Hao and the others were stunned. This was Douluo, a heavenly king. How could he be so easy to talk to? Even Elder Xian couldn't make King Yu back down at all. This teacher's arrival made heavenly King Yu back down so easily with just a few sentences? They didn't expect to encounter such a situation the moment they saw their teacher. Wang Feng nodded slightly. These heavenly kings were all shrewd. After these few matches, especially the match against the cursed doll, outsiders couldn't tell anything. However, these Douluo heavenly kings must have noticed something. Combined with the 6 or 7 matches, even if Shi Douluo was hiding it, they could still confirm it. In addition, Shi Douluo and the Star Heavenly King knew how he dealt with the soul demons. That was why he let go so easily. Xiao Tao, carry Jiang Nannan back to the bed first. Don't use any healing soul skills, they won't work on her. Wang Feng looked at Ma Xiaotao in the distance. Oh good, good. Ma Xiaotao came back to her senses and hurried over to carry Jiang Nannan back to the hospital bed. Then, Wang Feng looked at the children and reprimanded them. You guys don't even know what her martial spirit is, yet you let her use her second martial spirit. Wasn't he afraid that something would go wrong? Was winning or losing more important, or was his life more important? You may have won now, but what's the point? They immediately lowered their heads. It's all my fault. Ma Xiaotao was very fast. She walked out of the room. When she heard this, she immediately admitted her mistake. I'm the captain. I shouldn't have let Nan Nan play. Wang Feng glanced at her and shook his head. Young and impetuous, eager to win. How could he not understand? Teacher, I actually rejected it before. Huoyu Hao muttered softly, but Sister Nan Nan said that with you watching, we can't lose a single match. Otherwise, we'll be embarrassing you and the Soul Contract Master. That's why we have to win the championship. That's why we did this. Wang Feng was speechless. So you're blaming me? Wang Feng said, You're blaming me for watching all of you. No. Huoyu Hao hurriedly waved his hand and his face turned red. It's our fault. All right, even if you want to win the championship, you shouldn't have taken such a risk. Furthermore, this is a huge competition. If you had discovered the problem with Jiang Nannan's second martial spirit, you wouldn't have caused so much trouble. Wang Feng felt that if he hadn't come today, Jiang Nannan would have been taken away by the Angel Sacred Hall. Go and rest first. Prepare for the semifinals. I'll handle Jiang Nannan. Wang Feng looked at them and realized that they didn't move. He continued, I'm not in the mood to blame you kids. Go and rest. Huoyu Hao and the others were a little confused. When they heard this, they heaved a sigh of relief and went to rest. Senior, what's wrong with this child? Elder Xian came over and asked in a low voice. Muan didn't leave either. Wang Feng had communicated with the two before he left the Shrek Academy. They were the ones who told him about the soul demon. Naturally, they knew a little about it. Wang Feng briefly told them about Jiang Nannan's situation. After hearing this, Xian Zi and Mu En broke out in cold sweat. This was a ticking time bomb. If it exploded, I'll ask the starry heavenly king tomorrow. She's from the idealism sect. It'll be best if she has a suitable spiritual cultivation method for Jiang Nan. Wang Feng sighed. Although the purple demon eyes of the Tang sect can cultivate spiritual power, it's too slow. It takes a long time. Jiang Nan's current situation is not suitable for this kind of cultivation method. I'll suppress the martial spirit in her body and let her wake up first. Xianzi and Mu En had lived for many years. Naturally, they knew the theoretical knowledge. They also understood that relying on improving Jiang Nan's strength and spiritual power was the best way to solve this problem. However, how difficult was it to cultivate a spiritual cultivation method? The key was that it might not be suitable for everyone. For 10,000 years, the Tang sect had so many disciples. In fact, how many of them could learn the Tang sect's unique skills? If many people could learn these unique skills, the Tang sect, which only relied on hidden weapons, wouldn't have declined at all. Huiyu Hao could rely on the Tang sect's martial arts to defeat his opponents repeatedly. Wasn't it because this set of martial arts was not easy to learn? Things were precious when they were rare. How many of the disciples of those sects were able to fully learn and carry forward the techniques and moves created by those sects? The appearance of a martial soul gave a soul master many more attributes. It was impossible to casually cultivate a martial soul. The spiritual cultivation method of the idealism sect won't be leaked to outsiders. Mu En coughed a few times. Even the Douluo heavenly king won't force the sect to take out this cultivation method. Wang Feng nodded to express his understanding. After all, the country wouldn't force the company to hand over the company's secrets, right? The Federation had laws. Even if she got it, the spiritual cultivation method of the idealism sect might not be suitable for Jiang Nan. At this stage, any cultivation method was created according to martial spirit. It would only be suitable for martial spirit. But it'll be too troublesome if I teach Jiang Nan the forward secret word. This thing is powerful, but it's difficult to learn. Jiang Nan is weak and young now. She's not like Bibidan. Even Bibidan, I taught her for a long time. If I teach Jiang Nan the forward secret word, wouldn't she stay by my side for a long time? Do I have to teach her by example? How troublesome would that be? Moreover, Wang Feng didn't dare to teach the forward secret word to other girls. Logically speaking, this cultivation method was too mysterious. Some things could be vaguely seen between cultivators. To put it simply, Wang Feng was afraid that after Jiang Nan started cultivating, other cultivators might be able to sense it. That would be troublesome. What should he say when he went to the divine realm? Wang Feng, Zhu Qing and I have been waiting for you in the divine realm for so many years. You're still fooling around? Do you think you've hidden it well? We've sensed it long ago. You big bastard, Wang Feng vaguely heard Ning Rongrong's voice in his ear. Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. I'll wake her up first. Wang Feng quickly shook his head. He walked towards the inner room. End of this chapter. Chapter 1304. Wang Feng only used a little of the redemption origin energy to suppress the soul demon martial soul in Jiang Nan's body. He didn't dare to use too much. Otherwise, there would be problems with Jiang Nan's martial soul, and soul would be damaged. He could only suppress it. If Jiang Nan didn't use this martial soul, there wouldn't be such a problem. But once she used it, it was like turning on a switch, and it would be difficult to take it back. Before Jiang Nan could control this martial soul, she couldn't use it. Otherwise, the same situation as today would definitely happen, and the more she used it, the more dangerous it would be. She would definitely lose control. If there is one such situation, then there might be two. Wang Feng looked at Jiang Nan on the bed. This was definitely not an exception. Who knew how many eggs the dark demon realm had planted in the evil soul beasts, and how many soul demon souls were implanted? If there was one Jiang Nannan, there would be others like He Beibei and Hu Sisi. Maybe the same situation had happened, but the Federation hadn't noticed it yet. Boss, if you're so awesome, why don't you create a cultivation method yourself? Long Xie asked. Do you think you can create a cultivation method whenever you want? Wang Feng said angrily. Even with my wisdom, it will take me a few years to create a cultivation method. His main body was now comprehending the law of life in the divine mountain. How could he be in the mood to comprehend other cultivation methods? Given the current situation, those soul demons would definitely erupt in a few months, let alone a few years. If the dark demon realm used any evil tricks again, his clone might not be able to deal with it properly. And it was a cultivation method for the mind. The life-soul contract was an idea born from Wang Feng's comprehension of the law of life in the past 10,000 years. After being polished by time, it was only when he left the divine mountain in advance 10,000 years later that it was truly considered perfect. Even if the life-soul contract was much more complicated than a cultivation method couldn't be created just because one wanted to, unless the system raised its hand. With Wang Feng's understanding of the system, it was unlikely to give him a cultivation method directly. The secret of the forward word wasn't suitable for everyone to cultivate. This thing was too complicated and not suitable for promotion. It also required a lot of time to comprehend. It was only suitable for a few extremely talented people. Or, for someone like Wang Feng who had already comprehended it thoroughly, he could explain and teach them. That required even more time. Oh, while Wang Feng was deep in thought, Jiang Nannan said softly and looked up. It was as if countless years had passed and she had a dream, but it was also as if only an instant had passed. It wasn't until he opened his eyes that he saw light. You are Teacher Wang? Jiang Nannan looked at the man in front of her in a daze, and her pupils suddenly contracted. His surroundings slowly became clearer. He's awake. Wang Feng glanced at Jiang Nannan. The black marks on her body had basically disappeared. Now that he was awake, Wang Feng estimated that he could only last for a few days before he had to use the power of redemption to pressure him. He also had to control it well. If he used too much, Jiang Nannan would be in big trouble. Teacher Wang. Why are you here? Jiang Nannan wanted to get up, but she found that she had no strength in her body. She didn't even want to move a finger. She was only left with her underwear. In a daze, Jiang Nannan only knew that she had fainted. Why, teacher, did you win the competition? Our team should have won. Jiang Nannan's face slightly reddened as she asked cautiously. Wang Feng was silent for a few seconds. He didn't expect that the first question this girl asked when she woke up wasn't about her martial soul and body. It was related to the result of the competition? Yes, you won. Wang Feng replied calmly. That's great. Jiang Nannan heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Teacher, we didn't embarrass you. But, I'm not your student. Jiang Nannan looked at Wang Feng embarrassedly. Wang Feng looked at Jiang Nannan. He wanted to laugh, but he was also angry. Boss, if this girl only admires you, I, Long Xie, will never marry in my life. I'll leave it at that. Long Xie said confidently in the soul domain. Wang Feng didn't reply to Long Xie. How did you get your second martial soul? Wang Feng asked. This martial soul. Jiang Nannan thought for a while, and told him the origin of this martial soul. It was as Lin Lord Bingmu expected. When this girl was young, she ate a special egg and was in a coma for a few days. When she woke up at the age of 6, she found out she had a second martial soul. Her situation was similar to Tang San's. Her first martial soul was the soft bone rabbit. After awakening, she found out she had a second martial soul, but she didn't show it. Later, she found out this martial soul was filled with a dark aura. She was afraid people would think she was an evil soul master, so she didn't tell anyone. She didn't use it. Until now, in order to win the championship, she didn't want to lose, so she took the risk to use her second martial soul. She didn't even tell Ma Xiaotao and the rest before she used it, because she was afraid they wouldn't let her fight. Jiang Nannan remembered it very clearly. To someone as simple as her, this secret could be considered the biggest secret. Do you know what this martial soul means? Wang Feng looked at her. He understood Jiang Nannan's behavior. Just like when he got the Dark Angel martial soul, she didn't dare to use it casually. She didn't even dare to cultivate it. I might be thought of as an evil soul master. Jiang Nannan was silent for a few seconds, but I didn't use this martial soul to do anything bad. I only used it to defeat my opponents. I didn't break any rules, so the result of the competition will be valid. The Angel Sacred Hall will probably arrest me, but I have a clear conscience. Even if they do arrest me, they won't punish me the same way they punish evil soul masters. They'll just discipline me for a while. Furthermore, I believe the academy won't leave me alone. She was smart. The fact that Jiang Nannan could think of all this meant that she had her own thoughts before she used this martial soul. She didn't use it on a whim. It was a pity that she didn't understand this martial soul. TSK. Boss, look. This little girl is actually concerned about the result of the competition. Long Xie clicked his tongue in wonder. If it were anyone else, they would be concerned about their own safety, right? She didn't even ask about her own injuries. Boss, how can you bear to do that? Wang Feng ignored Long Xie's teasing. You're not allowed to use this martial soul without the permission of the academy's teachers. Do you understand? Wang Feng stood up. Yes. Jiang Nannan nodded obediently. Aren't you going to ask why? Wang Feng asked. End of chapter. Chapter 1305. Since teacher said so, he must have his reasons. Jiang Nannan whispered, besides, I know this martial soul isn't very good. I can't control it at all. It's just that I have a feeling that sometimes I can't control myself. Even if I don't use it, this martial soul will. Wang Feng nodded. It was fine as long as she knew what she was doing. Don't worry about that. I will help you suppress this martial soul. Wang Feng turned and left. Rest well. You can only watch them from the spectator's stand. Okay. Jiang Nannan watched Wang Feng walk out of the room and suddenly pressed her heart. A smile appeared on her face. The youth division competition was about to end. Wang Feng went to find Douluo. The Douluo heavenly kings happened to be at the front of the soul dueling arena. Wang Feng told them about Jiang Nannan's situation in detail because there was nothing to hide. As heavenly kings, they were naturally knowledgeable and understood Jiang Nannan's situation. So, there might be other situations like this? Heavenly King Nan Yuan said in surprise. This is troublesome. Although more than 70% of the soul masters on the continent are gathered in this competition, there are still many soul masters who didn't participate. There are even many soul masters who are not recorded in the Soul Master Integration Department. They are wild soul masters who don't have the identity of a soul master. If this happens, it will be very troublesome. The Soul Master Integration Department was similar to the Civil Affairs Bureau that Wang Feng knew. However, in this world, it was more like a combination of the Civil Affairs Bureau and the Education Bureau. They were responsible for the awakening of young soul masters and recording. The promotion of soul masters, the assessment, the allocation of quotas by the various academies, and a series of other things. Every 6-year-old child, regardless of whether they had innate soul power or not, would be recorded. It was equivalent to the Martial Soul Hall 10,000 years ago, but it had less power and was more simple. However, it was still very important in the Federation. As long as it was a department related to soul masters, it was very important. Once the information of a soul master was recorded in the Soul Master Integration Department, it could at least be traced back. The information in this world was not as developed as in Wang Feng's previous life. However, the power of a martial soul could replace a lot of information. The soul of a soul demon is extremely difficult to kill. Once it fuses with a human soul for a long time, then we must kill this human to have a chance of destroying it. Heavenly King Star Spirit muttered to himself, but if we do this, let's not talk about whether or not we can determine if the soul masters who use the evil soul beast egg have this kind of soul demon martial soul. Even if we do, are we going to kill them? Maybe some of them are still in the incubation period. Thinking of this, the Star Spirit Heavenly King suddenly felt a chill in his heart. The other Heavenly Kings also felt a chill run down their spines. They were all people who stood at the top of the world. Naturally, one could imagine the dangers involved. A few years later, if the humans were to exert all of their strength and barely manage to eliminate the exposed evil soul beasts and expel or kill the soul demons of the Dark Demon Realm, but when they looked back, they were shocked to find that their backyard was on fire, and they had become soul demons instead. How despairing was this? This was because many of them were still in hiding. With so many soul masters, although there was a Soul Master Unified Department, it was impossible to know the situation of all the Soul Masters in the Federation at all times, or even their specific locations. They might not even be able to find it. At that time, once those Soul Masters whose martial souls were still in the dormant stage erupted, who knew what would happen? There were even many Soul Masters who were like Jiang Nannan. They didn't understand what their martial souls represented. Jiang Nannan's situation was a huge premonition of danger. The key to this problem lies in these Soul Masters. The Shi Douluo glanced at Wang Feng and said, if they can control this martial soul, these humans will instead become a great help to the Federation. The key is how to increase their spiritual power. This is what you want to say, right? Smart people were like this. Wang Feng didn't need to say much. If the Shi Douluo knew, the other Heavenly Kings naturally knew as well. After all, they were familiar with the knowledge that the Soul Master world had researched. That's right. Wang Feng's gaze landed on the Star Spirit Heavenly King. The Star Spirit Heavenly King is from the Idealism sect. I heard that the Idealism sect has a spiritual cultivation method. Even in the past 10,000 years, there had only been a few spiritual cultivation methods. Only the Idealism sect existed today. The Tang sect also had one, but no matter who it was, they wouldn't reveal their core secrets to the world. This was harder than killing them. Furthermore, these cultivation methods had many restrictions. Not everyone could cultivate them. In the past, soul masters cultivated their soul power through meditation. I think that after a long period of development, soul masters have some understanding of spiritual power. It's time to promote a spiritual cultivation method, Wang Feng said. But is that so easy? Senior, you make it sound so easy. Heavenly King Dongli said softly, spiritual power is different from soul power. If there's a problem with soul power, at most, one's cultivation will drop. At worst, one will have to start all over again. As long as one's martial soul is still there, one will still have the ability to cultivate. But if there's a problem with spiritual power and the soul is damaged, there's no way to start all over again. Those spiritual cultivation methods have taken countless lives to develop. Furthermore, spiritual power is much more complicated than soul power. No matter how talented one is, spiritual power is a secret. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few spiritual-type soul masters on the continent today. This is because spiritual-type soul masters are extremely difficult to cultivate. It's easy to make mistakes and the mortality rate is too high. Not to mention other soul masters besides spiritual power. This problem was very difficult to solve. Heavenly King Star Spirit took 2 steps forward and said after thinking for a while, the Idealism sect's spiritual cultivation method is not suitable for ordinary soul masters to cultivate. It's also very difficult for them to take it out. If there are many people like Jiang Nannan, then it won't work to promote their sex cultivation method. That was true. However, it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. It was far too difficult to find soul masters like Jiang Nannan who were potential threats. If there was a good spiritual cultivation method and it was directly promoted to the entire Federation, then these threats could be solved once and for all. This was because as long as these soul masters' spiritual power increased, they would be able to solve the problem of them losing control when using these martial souls. Other than that, with a spiritual power cultivation method, the overall strength of soul masters would increase again. They would enter a brand new stage of cultivation. Although it would have a huge impact and change on the Federation, it would be good overall. With the addition of soul contract masters, the cultivation system would be more complete and the soul masters would be stronger. In the future, they wouldn't have to be afraid of the invasion of planes like the Dark Demon Realm, which was of a higher level than Douluo. Although it was a good thing, how difficult was it to achieve? However, Wang Feng had a way. End of chapter. Chapter 1306. However, Wang Feng had a way. It would take him a lot of time to create a cultivation method. However, it wouldn't be difficult for Wang Feng to improve on the original foundation. Wang Feng didn't have the ability to improve the former secret word at the moment, so it might not be easy to create a cultivation method. However, if it was to improve the cultivation method of the Douluo world, Wang Feng felt that it shouldn't be difficult. Although Wang Feng didn't know the cultivation method of the idealism sect, he was still confident that he could improve it in a short time. It might not be suitable for everyone, but it should be suitable for some people. The main thing was that Wang Feng had the courage and strength to try. It was very dangerous to improve the cultivation method of spiritual power. After all, he had to experiment whether this cultivation method was feasible or not. Once there was a problem during the cultivation process, there was basically no way to treat it with the current methods. This was a compromise that Wang Feng thought of. It was an idea that could solve this problem in a short time. The premise was that Wang Feng needed to know a cultivation method and the method of the idealism sect. Then, Wang Feng told them his idea. If they didn't know who Wang Feng was, they would most likely think that Wang Feng was crazy. Senior, are you sure? Heavenly King Nan Yuan couldn't help but ask. Improving a spiritual cultivation method is very dangerous. In history, it's not that no one has never done such a thing. On the contrary, many people have tried it. The best result was that he lived for 90 years and turned from a genius soul master to a cripple. His soul was damaged, and his intelligence was forever stuck at 15 years old. That was the best case. One could imagine how many soul masters had died since the idealism sect's spiritual cultivation method had been continued to this day. Many of the other soul masters who were researching spiritual cultivation methods had perished. Not to mention spiritual cultivation methods, even the cultivation methods of those sects would take a lot of time, manpower, and material resources to develop. If you have a better way, that would be better, Wang Feng said. This. Heavenly King Nan Yuan shook his head. In fact, there was still a way. For example, he could find these soul masters in advance and get rid of them. He would rather kill the wrong person than let them go. However, this method was extremely extreme. Unless it was a last resort, no heavenly king would agree to use this method. Senior, since you're able to create a life-soul contract, I'm sure you're able to improve the cultivation method. A faint smile appeared on the Shi Douluo's face. I feel like a life-soul contract is countless times more difficult and complex than any spiritual cultivation method. In fact, it was not something that could be created by humans. But she didn't say it out loud. All the Douluo heavenly kings present were stunned, and only then did they regain their senses. That's right. How great was the life-soul contract? For someone who could create such a miraculous power, how difficult would it be to change a mere spiritual cultivation method? Moreover, this senior had lived for so long, I'll call someone from Idealism sect over. The star spirit Heavenly King closed his eyes, as if he was using a special communication method. In the clear sky, Wang Feng saw a special light flicker. After a while, 3 men and women dressed in Idealism sect left and came over. The idealistic sect, if one were to talk about this sect, could be considered to have a great history. A spiritual type martial soul was similar to a body soul. Most of these martial spirits were not pure tool martial spirits or beast martial spirit. Its status was similar to that of the body sect. In the history of the Federation, it was also a famous sect. Its birth could be considered to have a very long history. When the star spirit Heavenly King became a soul master, he joined this sect, which was why there was the current star spirit Heavenly King. Without any nonsense, the star spirit Heavenly King directly explained the matter to the people from the Idealism sect. The 3 of them were all high-ranking figures of the Idealism sect. One was the sect master, and the other 2 were vice elders. The one participating in the pinnacle competition this time was their vice sect master and the next successor of the Idealism sect. He planned to come to the pinnacle competition to obtain a good ranking, and also perfectly take over the banner of the Idealism sect from the hands of the old sect master. Many sects' inheritances were often held once every 20 or 40 years. Therefore, one of the tests for the position of sect master was set in this pinnacle competition. After all, to be able to obtain a name in this competition meant that your strength had been recognized by the Federation. You were the top soul master in the entire continent. According to the strength of the sect, the requirements were different. For example, the requirement of the Idealism sect for the next sect master was to obtain a top 10 ranking in the competition. Otherwise, many people in the sect would not be convinced. After the star spirit Heavenly King finished speaking, the old man standing at the front of the 3 was silent for a few seconds before saying, "Sorry, forgive us for not being able to agree to this request." The old man glanced at Wang Feng. "You are all Heavenly Kings, and you know that our Idealism sect has spent countless lives and time researching this cultivation method. We can't publicize the cultivation method that our sect has passed down for so many years just because of your one-sided word. You old man, your horizons are still too low." The soldier Heavenly King couldn't help but mock, "You're really stubborn. Do you know how serious this matter is? Besides, it's not like the Federation won't compensate you. No matter how much compensation there is, it's useless." The old man said indifferently, "This is the foundation of our Idealism sect. There are very few spiritual-type soul masters. If this method is made public, then our sect can disband on the spot. Who will join our Idealism sect? Our Idealism sect has been passed down for so many years. I can't let it end in my hands." In all these years, the Idealism sect had only produced one spiritual type titled Douluo, the star spirit Heavenly King. Most of the others were stuck at rank 89. However, one shouldn't underestimate this rank 89 spiritual type soul master. Spiritual type soul masters were much stronger than other type. Especially spiritual type soul masters after rank 70, they had a very powerful characteristic. After their martial soul true body appeared, they would be immune to both physical and elemental damage. At the same time, they would have powerful spiritual attack. A spiritual type soul master over rank 80 was comparable to other titled Douluo over rank 90. The star spirit Heavenly King was at rank 97. If they fought, even a rank 98 Heavenly King might not be able to defeat her. This elder was a soul Douluo who was over rank 80. Actually, he was right. It didn't matter if he was narrow-minded or selfish. He was right from the perspective of the Idealism sect. This time, many Heavenly Kings were in a difficult position. Logically speaking, the Idealism sect belonged to the Federation. If they dared to refuse such a thing, they wouldn't say anything. They would just find a reason and the entire sect would be destroyed. Do you think the Federation is doing charity business with you? If it were any other time, they wouldn't force you to buy or sell. They would follow the rules. If you don't want to, then forget it. The key was that at this time, this matter was so important and troublesome. Who would have the time to discuss it with you? End of this chapter. Chapter 1307. Unfortunately, Heavenly King Star Spirit came from this sect, so the other Heavenly Kings naturally couldn't join forces to do such a thing. These Heavenly Kings all stood at a very high position and would consider many things. Heavenly King Star Spirit was the only spiritual type soul master on the continent, and his status was extremely important. Naturally, he couldn't do such a thing. Heavenly King Star Spirit wouldn't allow it either. However, Wang Feng smiled and said, "That's not right. If you publicize your sect's spiritual type cultivation method, it will be greatly beneficial to you." Everyone was stunned. Douluo seemed to have thought of something and nodded thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" The elder looked at Wang Feng. He had been paying attention to this young man for a long time. In this competition, he could be said to be extremely eye-catching. It was difficult not to pay attention to him. A soul contract master could be said to be a strong competitor for the top 10. Now that he had appeared here, it seemed that his status was very special. He was a shrewd person and could naturally tell that when the Douluo Heavenly Kings present looked at this soul master, their eyes were filled with respect. It was very extraordinary. Who could make the Douluo Heavenly Kings respect? Strength, status, and background were definitely not simple. "It's very simple," Wang Feng smiled faintly and said. "If you publicize your cultivation method, the idealism sect will not be cut off. Instead, it will be famous for eternity. At that time, those who cultivate your idealism sect's cultivation method will be considered disciples of your idealism sect in theory. At the very least, you will owe them a huge favor. At that time, all the spiritual type soul masters in the world will come out of the idealism sect. Isn't that good?" The elder was slightly stunned. He was actually a little moved by these words. Even the two elders who followed him felt their hearts beating wildly. Wang Feng was right. Really, this was a huge pie that Wang Feng had drawn. The premise was impossible. The elder waved his hand and said, "Don't try to fool me. Our spiritual cultivation method is not suitable for all spiritual type soul masters, let alone other soul masters. Just this point alone, even if it is publicized, it will only be convenient for a small portion of the people. And this small portion happens to be the soul masters that our sect need. After this matter is made public, our idealism sect will inevitably fall into decline. Unless our idealism sect's spiritual cultivation method is suitable for all soul masters on the continent. But if our cultivation method isn't that powerful, then all of the spiritual type soul masters in the world would have left our sect a long time ago. Otherwise, it will only bring harm to our sect." "Humph." The old man flicked his sleeves, clearly grasping the crux of the matter. That was indeed the case. "So, you can give him the cultivation method first. He can improve the cultivation technique of the idealism sect and promote it to all soul masters in the Federation. Ren Qianxing, this is a great contribution to both mankind and the Federation. There is no harm to idealism sect." "Improved?" The old man's expression changed as he looked at Wang Feng. He seemed to understand. "Is he not afraid of death?" One of the elders couldn't help but laugh. "He's not a member of our idealism sect. If we hand over the cultivation method to an outsider, who can guarantee that he won't?" Another elder said with a smile. Halfway through his sentence, he was so frightened by the gazes of the Heavenly Kings that he swallowed the rest of his words. "Ren Qianxing, we Heavenly Kings can vouch for him." Heavenly King Feather said indifferently, "If he can't improve a new spiritual type cultivation method, we, Heavenly King Douluo, will be responsible for it." The old man pondered for a few seconds and suddenly said, Sure, on the premise that, the old man looked at Wang Feng, if you can defeat Renyuha. Renyuha? Wang Feng frowned slightly. He's your opponent in today's match, and also the next successor of my idealism sect. He's also my son, the old man said calmly. Wang Feng looked at the old man in surprise. Your request is a bit special. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't you be asking me to go easy on him? After all, your sect's requirement for the successor is to enter the top 10. Why are you asking me to defeat him instead? Go easy? If the successor of my idealism sect needs to go easy on him to enter the top 10, he won't be qualified to be the successor. The old man said proudly, Yuha is extremely talented, but he still needs 20 years of polishing. He was too impatient this time and forced himself to participate in this pinnacle competition. He's very competitive. If he wins a few more matches and enters the top 100, not only will his life be in danger, it's very easy for him to develop inner demons due to failure. It's better to leave now and stifle his competitive spirit in advance. Let him understand his own strength and situation, and recognize himself. He can consider entering the top 10 next time. Hearing this, Wang Feng had a whole new level of respect for this old man. You said that his vision was low. His thought process of grooming a successor was quite wise. It was easy for spiritual-type soul masters to develop inner demons. Once inner demons appeared, their cultivation would stagnate or regress, and in serious cases, they would lose their minds. This request is very easy. Wang Feng nodded. No, this request isn't easy. Ren Qianxing said slowly. Yuha is currently rank 75, but he's a spiritual-type soul master, and has the help of powerful soul tools in my sect. It's difficult for ordinary titled Douluo to defeat him. Furthermore, his methods are too ruthless, and spiritual-type attacks can easily leave aftereffects on his enemies. His opponents don't end up well. It won't be easy for you to defeat him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have used this as a condition. Wang Feng smiled. The other Douluo heavenly kings also smiled. I have another request. Ren Qianxing looked at Heavenly King Star Spirit. I hope Heavenly King Star Spirit can give Yuha a chance. Wang Feng was stunned. What chance? But this was none of his business. There was no need for him to get involved. Defeating a spiritual-type soul master over rank 70 wasn't a challenge to him at all. Ren Qianxing, you're being presumptuous. Heavenly King Star Spirit's cold face relaxed slightly, and he said coldly, Who is Renyuha? Do you think I'll give him a chance? When he becomes a Douluo Heavenly King, I'll give him a chance. The might of a Heavenly King was so imposing. As soon as he said this, the air seemed to freeze. The backs of the old man and the two elders seemed to be bent by a mountain. Wang Feng was also slightly dazed. This was the first time he had seen these heavenly kings display their true aura to other soul masters. Whether it was their words, aura, or the confidence brought about by their powerful strength, Wang Feng was surprised. But thinking about it, these heavenly kings were able to stand out from the countless soul masters on the continent. Naturally, none of them were simple. Ren Qianxing gritted his teeth, as if he didn't want to give up. Heavenly King Star Spirit came from their idealism sect, but over the years, his relationship with the sect had been getting weaker and weaker. Although he cared for him a lot, it was already like decades ago. After all, he had already become a heavenly king, and his status was different. Because of this, he wanted to make this request. End of chapter. Chapter 1308. I let you come here to speak because only you are qualified. If you bring 2 more people, I will pretend that I didn't see it, Heavenly King Star Spirit said indifferently. You can be considered my teacher back then. I know what you are thinking. But aren't you underestimating a Douluo Heavenly King too much? Moreover, this should be Renyuha's idea, right? He saw that you were summoned by me and asked you, his father, to speak up for him, but he didn't even have the courage to follow you. Give him a chance? Who does he think he is? Heavenly King Star Spirit's eyes flickered as if he could see through people's hearts. The other Douluo Heavenly Kings remained silent. They had no intention of interfering. Heavenly King, Ren Qianxing said softly, I know Yuha is not worthy of you, but get lost if you know. Heavenly King Star Spirit's eyes were filled with frost. His powerful spiritual power condensed as he looked at Ren Qianxing. Ren Qianxing gritted his teeth and retreated with a pale face. At this moment, Shi Douluo suddenly laughed. Don't be angry, Star Spirit. How about this, Ren Qianxing, if your son can take 3 moves from him, I will help Star Spirit and agree to your request. How about that? Wang Feng was watching with relish at the side. To the vast majority of soul cultivators, being the successor of a sect leader was a high and mighty position. Unfortunately, he wanted to pursue the Douluo Heavenly King. Tsk. He was very ambitious. However, half of these Heavenly Kings were single. From the average age of Soul Masters, they were not considered old. They were all the most outstanding prodigies of their generation, so their talent must be extremely good. The oldest was Heavenly King Dharma, an old man of few words. He was more than 100 years old. The youngest was Heavenly King Wan, who was 60 years old. The next was Heavenly King Star Spirit, who was 62 years old. These were not secret. The only mysterious one was Shi Douluo. At this age, if placed among ordinary people, he would be considered a grandmother. But if placed among the average age of Soul Masters, he would be in his prime. The average age of Soul Masters in the Federation was around 110 years old. Other than the 3 who had disappeared, the 12 Heavenly Kings had not reached the average age. They could at least be re-elected for more than 100 years. In the next 100 years, there would be no changes to the Douluo Heavenly Kings led by Shi Douluo. Their future was bright. In comparison, a mere heir of a sect continued to pursue a Heavenly King. That was too bold. Just these few female Heavenly Kings, how many pursuers were there? Wang Feng was quite intrigued by this, but he didn't think that the Shi Douluo would change the topic so abruptly. It had to be said that this move was quite ingenious. This old man looked like an iron-head doll, the kind that was extremely stubborn. If the Star Spirit Heavenly King did not agree, he probably would not agree. However, the Shi Douluo had managed to tie the 2 issues together. Not only had he given the elderly man a way out of this situation, he had also resolved the issue perfectly. This was because these Douluo Heavenly Kings knew that Wang Feng only needed 1 move, let alone 3. Wasn't this equivalent to a disguised rejection? He was just playing with the information gap. The old man didn't know how strong Wang Feng was. As expected, the elderly man was ecstatic to hear this from Shi Douluo. Thank you, Heavenly Monarch Shi. I'll go back now and prepare my cultivation technique. Ren Qianxing clearly didn't think that his son would be able to defeat this soul renderer. But wouldn't receiving 3 moves be a piece of cake? He actually didn't think that the Star Spirit Heavenly King would agree directly. He didn't think that the Shi Douluo would personally give him a way out. Furthermore, the Shi Douluo was the leader of the Heavenly Kings. If she said so, she definitely wouldn't agree. Senior, it's up to you, the Shi Douluo said. This Ren Qianxing is extremely stubborn. If I didn't say so, he probably wouldn't have left and wouldn't have relented. The Star Spirit Heavenly King glanced at the Shi Douluo. Star Spirit, are you blaming me? Or do you not believe me? She smiled. The Star Spirit Heavenly King looked at the soul dueling stage in the distance and shook his head. He looked at Wang Feng and said, that Yuha is also the successor of the Idealism sect. 3 moves. Senior, please go easy on him. Ha 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 ha. Heavenly King Nan Yuan couldn't help but laugh. Ren Qianxing will be dumbfounded if he hears you. That's right. If you want Senior to defeat his son in 3 moves, you have to use your true abilities. After these 3 moves, Ren Yuha will probably regret being human. The heavenly kings shook their heads. With the Shi Douluo's methods, how could Ren Qianxing possibly give him such benefits? I say, are you that confident in me? Wang Feng said. I just need to defeat Ren Yuha. I might not only use 3 moves. If I use 4 or 5 moves, it won't affect me at all. As long as I win, Ren Qianxing will teach me his cultivation technique. I might not even use 3 moves. Wang Feng glanced at the heavenly kings and smiled. He turned and left. The competition is about to start. I have to go and prepare. The heavenly kings were stunned. They seemed to be trying to figure out what Wang Feng meant. Big sister Shi, you seem to have screwed up. Heavenly King Nan Yuan said in surprise. Senior is indeed senior. He doesn't want to help you. Star Spirit, your happiness might be ruined just like that. Ruined what? The Star Spirit Heavenly King asked. Look, Senior means that if he doesn't help Big Sister Shi, he might not help you. Didn't you hear what he said? He obviously wants to use a few moves. He will definitely use more than 3 moves to defeat Ren Yuha. When the time comes, won't you have to give Ren Yuha a chance to pursue you? Heavenly King Nan Yuan said as he counted with his fingers. The Star Spirit Heavenly King spat out a word. So what? Didn't you look down on Ren Yuha? Heavenly King Nan Yuan's eyes widened. Yes, I'm just giving him a chance. What does a chance mean? Did I agree to anything? The Star Spirit Heavenly King's cold face curled up. I have given some people a chance. Unfortunately, no one has ever been able to grasp it. Heavenly King Nan Yuan was stunned. Star Spirit, you are too cunning. Wasn't it obvious that she was giving you a chance and then rejecting you? But the Star Spirit Heavenly King didn't give in at all. It was easy to misunderstand that the Heavenly King only gave you a chance and agreed. In fact, the Shi Douluo also smiled. This was actually for Ren Yuha's own good. So what if she gave him a chance to pursue her? Could he control it? Women are so complicated. Heavenly King Bing shook his head. Every woman is a natural performer. Heavenly King Yu sighed. Then, he smiled and said, but we men are not bad either. Heavenly King smiled and remained silent. At this time, the peak group competition officially began. Chapter 1309. The 8th round. There were less than 500 people left in the summit tournament. Half of them were eliminated every time, and the finals were in a few days. At this point, it was clear to him. Most of the rank 70 Soul Masters had been eliminated. 4 out of 5 of them were Soul Douluo and above. The battles were even more intense than before. Because every battle was about the same strength, they had to show their true abilities if they wanted to win. There were fewer and fewer people left, but the discussions were getting more and more heated. Huoyu Hao's match yesterday had attracted a lot of attention. However, the Federation officials quickly responded and said that Jiang Nanan's martial soul was a dark-type martial soul, and she wasn't an evil soul master. They gave an explanation. Regardless of whether it was in terms of authority or status, the Federation held a very high position in the hearts of soul masters. Since the explanation was given, most people believed it. Only a small number of people were suspicious and felt that there was something fishy going on. Furthermore, the summit tournament had started, which attracted the attention of soul masters. Although Jiang Nanan's second martial soul was special and caused a lot of influence, the Federation had given a clear explanation. In addition to the 8th round of the summit tournament, the voices of discussion gradually disappeared. More than 400 people were considered a small number. However, Wang Feng saw soul masters from all over the Federation among these 400 people. Wang Feng had learned a lot from the soul cultivators he had met so far. New martial souls, body souls, cultivation techniques. The more he fought, the clearer Wang Feng saw the changes in the Federation. Ren Yuha. Wang Feng thought for a moment and seemed to have thought of something. He couldn't help but laugh. The Douluo did that because she wanted the other heavenly kings to feel her strength more clearly. In other words, she was also testing the strength of this ancient figure from 10,000 years ago. Of course, she didn't really want him to help the Star Spirit King. What a joke. A Star Spirit King didn't need anyone's help if she wanted to reject someone else's pursuit. This was because she needed something to defeat a rank 70 spiritual type soul master in 3 moves. Just a soul-bonded beast wasn't enough. Up until now, most of Wang Feng's attacks were unfathomable. The only time was when he was facing the cursed doll martial spirit. He displayed his strong physique. Of course, that was considered a passive attack. Wang Feng didn't accept it because he didn't want her to test him. That was why he said those words. A spiritual type soul master, Wang Feng slowly walked onto the stage. At this moment, a tsunami of shouts came from the spectator stands that were further away. Most of them were cheering for the soul masters they supported. There were also those who placed bets on treasures. There were at least several 100,000 spectators, and many of the high-grade soul masters felt a natural sense of pride and excitement when they stepped onto the stage. Wang Feng thought for a moment, then suddenly looked off to the side, where he saw the silver-haired woman. Her expression was calm, unaffected by the many voices calling out to her. As a silver dragon, of course, she would not be happy about being welcomed by the humans. So far, this silver dragon doesn't seem to have harmed anyone. Wang Fengxin thought to himself, to be able to endure the grudges between humans and soul beasts, it seems like this silver dragon is also a person with principles. Maybe I'm wrong. She might not be here to cause trouble for me. I hope she has good intentions towards humans. Wang Feng knew that the chances were slim. However, he could not help but think that way. The silver dragon's opponent today was not a titled Douluo, but a soul Douluo. Interestingly, it was really a soul Douluo from the Blue Lightning Tyrant sect. As a sect that possessed a dragon-shaped martial soul and cultivated the dragon lightning technique, it was his bad luck to meet this silver dragon. However, this soul Douluo's mutated martial soul, the purple lightning tyrant dragon, was much stronger than the pure blue lightning tyrant dragon. This was also the reason why this soul Douluo was so confident in winning until now. After taking a few glances, Wang Feng retracted his gaze and walked onto the stage that belonged to him. Look, Brother Tian, he's looking at Master again. He's paying attention to Master in almost every match. This means that my deduction is correct. Somewhere in the spectator stands, Bicky saw Wang Feng's little actions clearly. Although Wang Feng's pause was very short, no one would have noticed if they weren't paying attention. If he doesn't like Master, why would he pay attention to Master in every match? The more Bicky thought about it, the more she felt that she was right. Tian hesitated for a few seconds. Although I'm not human, I'm still a man. When human men look at women, sometimes it's not because they care, but subconsciously. It's because they're attracted by the special characteristics in the other party's eyes. It's like Master watches him in every match. This doesn't mean anything. Tian thought for a moment and said, since the start of the competition, I've been paying attention to a few people. Every time I go on stage, I'll look for these people. This is because they pose a certain threat to us. Bicky, you might have misunderstood. Tian coughed and said, you're not human and you don't understand humans. You only know how to fight and only value strength. I don't think that's the case. Bicky retorted. Tian opened his mouth slightly. He wanted to say, you're not human either. Then how do you understand? He thought about it and decided to forget it. Well, let's watch the match first. Wang Feng met Renyuha. Frankly speaking, his senses were not bad. At the very least, he could be considered handsome. He was in his 50s, but he looked no different from a man in his 30s. He had an elegant temperament, but his eyes were too sharp. One look and one could tell that he was an extremely competitive person. He was wearing a white battle suit and had long hair. His sideburns were white and he looked a little old. Just by looking at his appearance, he was worthy of being the successor of the sect. Please. Ren Yuha cupped his hands towards Wang Feng. Ren Qianxing must have immediately told Ren Yuha about this after returning. As long as he could take 3 moves from the other party, it would be fine even if he lost. Thinking of this, Ren Yuha's eyes were still a little excited. It disappeared in a flash and was hidden very deeply. Not only did he have to take 3 moves from the other party, he even had to defeat the other party. Only then would he be worthy of the opportunity that the Star Spirit Heavenly King had given him. Strictly speaking, when the Star Spirit Heavenly King was in the sect, he was his uncle master. He was an expert of the elder generation. However, the Heavenly King at that time was no longer someone that ordinary people could approach. At that time, he was not considered the successor of the sect. Although he was talented, he could only look up to the Star Spirit Heavenly King from afar. If not for the fact that the Star Spirit Heavenly King was unwilling to join the Idealism sect, the current sect master of the Idealism sect would be the Star Spirit Heavenly King. In just over 10 years, when the Star Spirit Heavenly King became a titled Douluo, the Idealism sect could no longer hide the glory of this spiritual type genius. End of chapter. Chapter 13:10. It couldn't bear the talent and strength of the Star Spirit Heavenly King. Naturally, he entered the Martial Spirit Palace and became a Douluo Heavenly King, reaching the peak of the Federation. Back then, even if there was only one chance to pursue the goddess, it was still hope for him. Wang Feng followed the usual practice and released the little Kuan shark first. An orthodox spiritual type soul master was even more powerful than the cursed doll soul master from before. Furthermore, it came from the only spiritual type martial soul sect in the entire continent. The Idealism sect's status was equivalent to the body sect. The spiritual type martial soul itself was considered a unique category. Little guy, this is an orthodox spiritual type soul master. All of his attacks will be spiritual attacks. Wang Feng said, "This is also a huge test for you. Your body has become very strong because of cultivating the dark demonic qi, but your spiritual strength is not strong enough. No matter what attack you encounter later, as long as you can withstand it, it will be a huge improvement for you." "Boss, I understand." The little Kuan shark nodded. After 8 rounds, the little Kuan shark had also gone through several battles. Most of them were crushed and suffered all kinds of injuries. This was a test for him. The more he lost now, the more invincible he would be in the future. Ren Yuha couldn't help but laugh when he saw the soul contractor releasing the 1,000-year soul beast again. The dragon from before was clearly stronger, but he didn't release it and instead used this 1,000-year soul beast. Was he looking down on him? Ren Yuha wasn't angry. It was better if he looked down on him. This way, he wouldn't have to expend any effort to withstand 3 moves. However, he could look down on him, but he couldn't look down on him. The Star Spirit Heavenly King was watching, so he couldn't perform too badly. Taking a deep breath, Ren Yuha released his martial soul. His martial soul was very strange. It was a city. Very magical. When Wang Feng saw this martial soul, he was stunned on the spot. However, the city appeared illusory, like a mirage. It was very unique. But it was indeed a city in the style of the Heaven Do political district. It was very big. Once his martial soul was released, Ren Yuha looked much smaller. It was just that this city was more like a model. This martial soul could be said to be very unique. At least among the martial souls that Wang Feng had seen before, this was the only one that was so huge. 7 soul rings shone. 7th soul skill, martial soul true body. Ren Yuha said calmly. With that, the 7 soul rings disappeared one after another. In an instant, Ren Yuha disappeared. The city gradually grew larger. Clouds and mist swirled around until they enveloped the entire arena. It looked extremely shocking, Regardless of whether they were inside or outside, they all felt regret and shock. Welcome to my spiritual world. This is my martial soul, the city of dreams. Voices came from all directions. The surrounding buildings began to solidify. Wang Feng knew that it wasn't real, but it was real in this world. Because this was no longer a simple world. This person's martial spirit isn't a city. Wang Feng said slowly, "It's a dream. It's just that his dream is this city." This mystical martial spirit made Wang Feng feel incomparably curious. A martial spirit could be anything, whether it existed or not, it could become a martial spirit. In terms of strength, this martial soul was very powerful. The future successor of the idealism sect was naturally not just a soul master with an ordinary martial soul. Rumble. Boss, what should I do? Little Coin Shark was a little dumbfounded. Even Wang Feng was curious, and he had never seen it before. Stop it with silence. You can try attacking first, Wang Feng said. Little Coin Shark nodded and changed his body. He directly unleashed his soul skill and charged towards the surrounding buildings. Little Coin Shark was more than 4 meters tall. After unleashing his soul skill, his flying body was like an airplane as he crashed into various buildings in the city. But after a few seconds, these buildings returned to their original state. There was basically no effect. The martial soul true body of a spiritual type martial soul was extremely immune to many types of damage. It's useless. Little Coin Shark tried a few more times. He realized that no matter how he attacked, there was no effect. These buildings seemed to be fake. When I crashed into them, I didn't feel anything at all, Little Coin Shark said. As soon as he said that, a large tower that was at least 20 meters tall suddenly swept towards the Little Coin Shark from afar like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. Little Coin Shark reacted quickly. But when he thought that these buildings were fake, he wasn't worried. Until the pagoda landed on him. He knew that he was wrong. Boom! Little Coin Shark was like a kite with a broken string as he was sent flying over 100 meters away by the pagoda. He spat out blood. Many buildings were destroyed along with him, but they immediately returned to their original state. Little Coin Shark was the only one that didn't recover. Boss, why are these buildings real when they hit me? Little Coin Shark was confused. Nonsense. This is his dream world. It's equivalent to his spiritual world. It's definitely effective when he hits you. Wang Feng said, but there's no effect when you hit him. Isn't this cheating? Little Coin Shark was furious. How can I hit him? Before he could finish his sentence, a few more sky-piercing stone pillars burst out from the ground, lifting up the Little Coin Shark that was lying on the ground. Then, they clamped the two together. Little Coin Shark was like a target. A few more buildings flew from afar and crashed onto him. Little Coin Shark was dizzy from the impact. Boss, this martial soul seems to be cheating. Long Xie saw that Little Coin Shark was in a passive state. This is my first time seeing a human with such a special martial soul. Should I come out and try to? Wang Feng let Long Xie out. With Long Xie's size, he seemed to expand a little when he appeared. But compared to the city, he was still very small. It was like a monster from Ultraman appearing in a city. Long Xie was that monster. Break! Long Xie yelled and spread his wings. Instantly, lightning flashed in the sky and the ground boiled. It was like a volcano erupting and lightning descending. It was like the end of the world. It was extremely shocking. Wang Feng found it interesting. He was suddenly interested in Ren Yuha. Of course, it was mainly his martial soul. This martial soul was really interesting. As Long Xie appeared, the world seemed to be collapsing. The lightning struck and destroyed all the houses. A large area began to collapse. As the earth shook, countless buildings were swallowed up. The ground seemed to have a mouth that was swallowing everything. You look like a villain who's going to destroy the world, Wang Feng said to Long Xie. Really? I think it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's all fake, Long Xie said regretfully. You still want to do it for real? Long Xie still had the violent nature of a dragon. Hee. End of chapter. Chapter 13:11. Long Xie was like a destructive beast as he unleashed his wrath and destroyed the entire world. Even many soul cultivators were shocked by the sight of this. You're so strong. If your soul beast were to fight, none of the cities in the Federation would be able to withstand it. Renyuha's voice came from all directions. This guy was quite scheming. He was clearly trying to sow discord. Unfortunately, I'm the master of my dream world. You can't destroy it. As soon as he finished speaking, although Wang Feng didn't see any soul rings, he knew that Renyuha had used a soul skill. Suddenly, all the buildings that Long Xie had destroyed started to recover. However, they didn't recover out of thin air. Instead, they recovered as if they were rewinding time. The broken buildings, the stones on the ground, and the dust in the air started to recover as if a button had been pressed. Damn, that's amazing! Long Xie was shocked. He can recover even like this? That's impossible, right? I thought these buildings were formed by his soul power. Recovering them requires soul power. As long as I destroy them fast enough, the city's recovery speed won't be able to catch up to me. Long Xie was very smart. In theory, his guess was correct. Even if these buildings and this dream world were formed by spiritual power, they were definitely filled with soul power. Otherwise, these buildings wouldn't have hurt the small Kuan shark. Therefore, it wasn't that destroying these buildings was useless. It was just that he didn't destroy much. Renyuha would have to use his soul power to fill and rebuild every single building that he destroyed. However, if that was the case, Long Xie wouldn't have been able to recover in such a short time. Even if he used a soul skill, it would still be the same. It was as if he had retreated in an instant. It was unbelievable. The strength of a spiritual type soul master lies in one word: unpredictability. The stronger a spiritual type soul master is, the more difficult it is to figure out. The Douluo watched this scene from outside. That's because spiritual type soul masters are involved in the mysteries of the soul. This Renyuha is also a genius. I've heard of his martial soul many times, but this is the first time I've seen it in this tournament. Not bad. For the Douluo to say, not bad, it meant that this martial soul was very valuable. The other Douluo heavenly kings didn't know much about spiritual type soul masters, but they could tell a thing or two from watching the battle. Normal spiritual type martial souls used their powerful spiritual power to unleash various powerful soul skills, such as various spiritual attacks, spiritual emulation, spiritual shock, spiritual weakening, etc. It could only reflect the word strange. To the enemy, Qi was still something that could be broken. It was fine as long as he was strong enough. However, very few martial spirits were able to embody the word sly in a spiritual type martial spirit. What people couldn't fathom was craftiness. If you can't find a way, no matter how strong you are, you won't be able to break out of this situation. Long Xie was very strong, but he was still useless against Long Xie. On the other hand, Renyuha's spiritual type martial soul was both strange and bizarre. He was indeed the heir of idealism sect. Where is the way to break out of this martial spirit? You won't screw up, will you? Heavenly King Nan Yuan asked. She looked at the star spirit Heavenly King. As a spiritual type titled Douluo, the star spirit Heavenly King definitely knew how to break this martial soul. The star spirit Heavenly King was silent for a few seconds before saying, "This kind of dream martial soul uses the combination of one's powerful spiritual power and martial soul to pull the enemy into one's own martial soul. His martial soul is a dream city. In this city, he is invincible." So powerful? Heavenly King Nan Yuan was surprised. This idealism sect hid it well. They didn't show it, but this guy is actually so strong? The idealism sex cultivation method is to hide their strength. The Star Spirit Heavenly King said indifferently, otherwise, Ren Qianxing wouldn't have asked this senior to defeat his son and not let him continue fighting. Star Spirit, you haven't said how to break this martial soul? Heavenly King Nan Yuan asked. Dreams are illusory. The Star Spirit Heavenly King sighed softly. It's also unreal. In his dream world, everything can be real. If you want to break it, you have to wait for his spiritual power to be exhausted. Or your spiritual power is far stronger than his. When you reach my level, you can easily break it. Your level? Heavenly King Nan Yuan was shocked. No wonder you're all spiritual type soul masters. TSK. If it were me, I wouldn't let him release his martial soul true body. In his martial soul dream city, those buildings seem to be damaged and will consume his soul power. But in reality, in the dream world, he is a god. The Star Spirit Heavenly King said, because in the dream world, he can do whatever he wants. He can convert all those attacks into pure energy and directly absorb them. He can also pretend to be smashed into pieces and then recover. Everything is decided by his will. What is consumed is only his spiritual power. It's just that when he drives the city to attack, it will consume his soul power. In other words, in this dream world city, only he can attack others, no one can attack him. At this point, the Star Spirit Heavenly King paused. Even if there is, he will deliberately pretend to be attacked to consume the other party's soul power. Those broken buildings just now won't be destroyed. Because those are all fake, but Ren Yuha can make those things shatter after being attacked by the enemy, making the enemy mistakenly think that the buildings can be destroyed and that they need to consume his soul power, so they will attack with all their might and consume a lot of soul power. In the end, he will only be invincible. As expected of a spiritual type titled Doulu. The Star Spirit Heavenly King was very knowledgeable and immediately explained the characteristics of Ren Yuha's martial soul. Very cunning. Heavenly King Nan Yuan nodded. This martial soul is really powerful. Like Heavenly King Rushi said, it's not bad. The Star Spirit Heavenly King affirmed. It should be hard for outsiders to see through this martial soul, right? Heavenly King Yu frowned slightly as he looked at the cloud. Most soul cultivators wouldn't be able to see what was going on in there. Hearing you say that, I am a little worried. Heavenly King Nan Yuan rested her chin on her hands. Although she was not young, she still had the heart of a young girl. Even if he is White Popediff and lived for 10,000 years, he might not understand these martial souls now. The soldier Heavenly King sighed. Times have changed. Times have indeed changed. Wang Feng really did not understand such a strange martial soul. Long Xie was helpless. Sigh, I am not in good condition today. Boss, I will go back and rest for a while. Long Xie returned to the soul domain. After a series of crazy operations just now, he realized that it was useless. He felt that this thing was too troublesome. In order to protect his reputation, Long Xie decided to stop for now. End of chapter. Chapter 13:12. Do you want me to give it a try? Qilin Lord Isimu was silent for a long time. This martial soul is strong, but I feel like I can break it. No need. Wang Feng was silent for a few seconds. Your aura is special. You'll cause a commotion if you appear. Furthermore, it's not about how strong you are. It's about the method you use to break this martial soul. Boss, do you have an idea? Long Xie asked. I agree with you. I have a feeling that this person is waiting for us to attack. The more we attack, the more we'll fall into his trap. Long Xie didn't understand this martial soul. However, with his combat intuition, he was able to detect it. This was also a kind of talent. Logically speaking, the more damage I cause, the more soul power he'll need to expend even more soul power to recover. But it doesn't seem to work. Long Xie didn't understand this point. Wang Feng smiled. At this moment, Renyuha's voice sounded from afar. If you have more soul-bound beasts, you can use them all. Or you can do it yourself. Renyuha's tone was arrogant. You haven't even used one of your 3 moves yet. Renyuha was very proud. He didn't think that Wang Feng was the one who attacked Long Xie or the little Kuan shark. Simply put, he didn't think much of Long Xie or the little Kuan shark. Fuck, I'm being looked down on by a human soul master? Long Xie was furious. Boss, your soul-bound beast is being looked down on. Aren't you going to get back at him? You make it sound so powerful. I thought you were going to do it yourself. Wang Feng said disdainfully. Give me 100,000 years. I'll kill these pieces of trash with a breath. Long Xie coughed a few times. Wang Feng walked in front of the little Kuan shark. Little guy, do you want to defeat him? Wang Feng asked. Yes. The little Kuan shark nodded. After thinking for a few seconds, it added, but I can't beat him. Very honest. Wang Feng smiled. I'll teach you a way to defeat him. It's very simple. Is there really such a way? The little Kuan shark couldn't believe it. The little Kuan shark didn't think it would be a problem if his boss defeated him. But it seemed like there was a huge gap between them. Even Brother Long was helpless. If it was the other soul cultivators from before, Wang Feng thought for a moment, you might not be able to beat them. But this soul cultivator, you might be able to beat him. What should I do? The little shark asked. Long Xie was curious, so he perked up his ears to listen. Renyuha was a little angry in his heart. This person actually wanted to use his soul-bonded beast to defeat him? Was that even possible? Did he not understand the current situation at all? Or does he not know anything about my martial soul? Simple. 2 words, Wang Feng said slowly. In your dreams. Little Kuan shark did not know whether to laugh or cry. Boss, you don't have to play with me like this. I'm also your soul-bonded beast. What do you mean by playing with you? I'll let you dream. Wang Feng frowned. He seemed to know that the little shark had misunderstood, so he said, it's the literal meaning. Sleep and enter the dreamland. Little Kuan shark was stunned. I don't understand. This is his dream city. Wang Feng said plainly. In his dream, he's invincible in theory. He can create any rules because this is just a dream. Only by letting your spirit leave his dream city, you won't be affected by the rules of this dream city. In a dream city, if you let your spirit leave, you just have to enter your own deep consciousness. Dream within a dream. Little Kuan shark looked at Wang Feng blankly. Long Xie was deep in thought. I'll teach you how to do it. Give yourself an order. Wang Feng continued, defeat your opponent. This was called implanting thoughts. Little Kuan shark nodded. He was naturally focused. Now, let alone giving an order, his heart wanted to defeat his opponent. After all, after fighting for so long, he had not won a single battle with his own strength. Then enter sleep. Although you're no longer a Kuan, it's not difficult for you to enter sleep in this state. Wang Feng continued. Little Kuan shark nodded. This was not difficult either. When he was training, he developed the habit of entering sleep in any state. Also, this is his martial soul. It's also his dream world. To be precise, we're in his dream world. This is a special spiritual type martial soul. It's different from those illusions. Everything is controlled by him. However, a dream world is a manifestation and magnification of a soul master's spiritual world. Wang Feng said, this place definitely has its flaws. It's just that he hid them very well. No one's spiritual world is perfect. Of course, I'm an exception. When Wang Feng said that it was perfect, it meant that the mistakes made would be left in the depths of one's heart. Wang Feng's soul had been tempered by the karmic fire of the Red Lotus. After that, it had been tempered. In addition, he had cultivated the front secret. If this Renyuha belonged to the type of soul master who had a pure and innocent heart, His body was like an origin embryo, and his heart was free of distractions. Then, Wang Feng would pretend that he did not say anything. Such people were 1 in a million. They were born with a pure heart. They were geniuses in everything they did. Wang Feng felt that the Shi Douluo was one of them. However, Ren Yuhe was probably not. Little Coin Shark seemed to understand. Then, let's sleep. Wang Feng waved his sleeves. At this moment, countless buildings appeared in the distance. Evidently, Ren Yuhe had heard their conversation. He would not let go of this opportunity to attack. However, unlike Long Xie and Little Coin Shark, Wang Feng did not move at all as he looked at the buildings. How dare you show off your skills in front of an expert? Wang Feng smiled. He stood where he was and did not move. He did not dodge and allowed the buildings to land on his body. In an instant, Wang Feng's body became ragged, and there were countless wounds on his body. Boss, why are you resisting? Long Xie was shocked. What if something happens to you? What will we do? Scram, don't make it sound so ambiguous. Open your eyes and take a look. Do you really think I'm injured? Wang Feng shouted. Long Xie flew out again and rubbed his eyes. He looked at Wang Feng, who was covered in wounds. That's not right. You're covered in wounds, but your aura doesn't seem to have changed. Long Xie rubbed his eyes to make sure that he was not seeing things. However, he was very smart. He suddenly realized something. Is this an illusion? It's an illusion. It's an illusion that he wants you to see, Wang Feng said. This kind of martial soul does not have any substantial offensive power. He can pull us into his dream world, and he can do anything he wants. For example, he wants you to think that you're injured. He wants you to think that you can destroy this world easily. He wants you to think that your attacks are very strong and have a very strong effect on him. In reality, your body is not injured at all. Simply put, do you think those buildings really exist? End of chapter. Chapter 13:13. Long Xie thought for a moment. Those buildings were dozens of meters tall, and they looked like small mountains. It was very scary. However, he might not be able to launch such an attack with his strength. It was very unlikely that a rank 70 soul master would be able to unleash an attack of this caliber. Long Xie was enlightened. After Wang Feng finished speaking, his body slowly returned to its original state. Long Xie was shocked to see this. This martial soul wasn't just a martial soul. It was infused with special psychological knowledge. Many soul masters who didn't know much about it couldn't resist at all. Even if they were stronger than Ren Yuhe, it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. Furthermore, ordinary soul masters couldn't understand it if outsiders weren't inside. Those who weren't high-tier spiritual-type soul masters wouldn't be able to see anything. Once he understood this point, the Dream City martial soul was indeed powerful. It wasn't very powerful. If Wang Feng wanted to, he could break it with a flick of his finger. Then why don't you take a look and see if this is a small trick? Ren Yuhe's voice was laced with anger. Suddenly, the entire world was turned upside down. The Milky Way was inverted, and all the buildings and plants in the city were destroyed and reformed. The sun in the sky above the city fell and turned into a huge head. Countless buildings turned into a body and formed a humongous giant. Countless metals attached to the giant's body and turned into armor. It was as if it had completed some sort of transformation ceremony. Its body shone with golden light, and it looked like an ancient god. Roar! The giant roared and attacked Wang Feng. It's all an illusion. Long Xie sneered and said, I'm not afraid of you. Long Xie seemed to understand Wang Feng's words. He rushed up and flew into the sky. He wasn't afraid at all as he looked at the giant that was several times bigger than Long Xie. When the giant saw Long Shifei provoking him in midair, he didn't even think before slapping him in the face. Fake space. It's all an illusion. Long Xie sneered when he saw the slap. He was extremely disdainful. It was obvious that the giant was a figment of the other party's imagination. Then, smack! Long Xie was sent flying again, and he let out a miserable roar. He fell to the ground, twitched a few times, and struggled to stand up. He grimaced and said, "Boss, why do I feel like I'm in pain? It's different from what you said." Long Xie touched the wound on his forehead and neck. Just touching it made him feel heart-wrenching pain. Hee, I know it's all fake." Long Xie smiled faintly. "The pain is also fake." "No, it's true," Wang Feng said. "You're injured." Long Xie stared at Wang Feng in shock. "Boss, didn't you say, are you stupid?" Wang Feng snappily said. "He already knows that we know that the attack method he used before was an illusion. Do you think he'll use the same move again? He would definitely change his moves. His martial soul didn't possess any substantial offensive capabilities, but that didn't mean that it didn't have any special offensive soul skills. He's using powerful offensive soul skills in this dream world. Won't he be able to cause substantial damage to you soon? Although it's just a small trick, he can't be stupid." Long Xie understood, but he still didn't understand. But he can't condense such a giant even if he has immense soul power. "The giant is fake," Lin Lord Ice Empress suddenly said. "But the slap that he used to slap you was real. It had soul power, so it should be a real soul skill. That giant is just an illusion. It's just an illusion. You thought you understood, but he made use of your mentality to hide the real attack in this illusion." Long Xie was enlightened. Simply put, everything that Ren Yuhe had seen before was just an illusion that he had imagined in his dream world. He wanted his enemies to feel that they were being attacked by these illusions and think that they were real. In reality, they couldn't be real. However, this was a real soul skill. Soul skills were formed by soul power and spiritual power. It looked fake and empty on the outside, making people mistakenly think that it was fake, but in fact, it was real. When Ren Yuhe heard Wang Feng's words, he knew that Wang Feng had understood the weakness of his martial soul. However, Ren Yuhe had already thought about this. How should he deal with it when his martial soul was exposed? Therefore, he deliberately disguised his soul skill as an illusion under such circumstances. It was easy for others to think that Ren Yuhe was using it to confuse his opponents. However, he had hidden the attack inside, and it was impossible to guard against it. Long Xie's mouth twitched. No wonder it felt so real. Roar! That's why I said it's just a small trick. Wang Feng looked at the giant that reached into the clouds and shrugged. You exposed your weakness so easily. Wang Feng turned to look at the small Kuan shark. Yes, it's asleep. Wang Feng nodded. The small Kuan shark had already fallen asleep. In this dream world, one couldn't avoid the interference and attacks that Ren Yuhe had imagined even if one closed their eyes. Unless one was like Wang Feng, who could see through everything. However, it was more difficult to attack Ren Yuhe at the same time. This was because one didn't know where he was, and they didn't know whether his attack was real or fake. Fake and real, real and fake. However, when one's spirit entered hibernation, one wouldn't be affected by this situation. Go. Wang Feng patted the small Kuan shark. The small Kuan shark had its eyes closed, and it didn't seem to understand anything. However, it seemed to understand Wang Feng's words. It attacked the giant. In the small Kuan shark's subconscious, defeating Ren Yuhe was its only goal. When it entered the dream world after hibernation, it would only have one goal. Seeing the small Kuan shark attacking, the giant's hands were like illusions as it threw out countless punches. It was hard to tell which punch was real and which was fake. However, something that shocked Long Xie happened. The small Kuan shark didn't even try to dodge. It rushed forward and was as agile as a mosquito. It wasn't hurt at all. It didn't even hit a single punch. Damn, what's the principle behind this? Long Xie was stunned. There must be a real attack among so many punches. We can't sense it. How did it do it? Renyuha wasn't stupid. He knew what Wang Feng said. Naturally, he wouldn't just throw out one punch. If there was only one punch, it would definitely be real. Therefore, it was impossible to directly imagine that the giant would launch many attacks and hide the most powerful move among them. It's a talent and a method. Wang Feng smiled. The small Kuan shark has entered the dream world. He's not affected by this dream world. He won't see or feel anything that Renyuha imagines, so there's no need for him to judge. Only the real attack can be sensed by the small Kuan shark fighting Renyuha in the dream world. That's why he can dodge. This is the small Kuan shark's talent. You have it too. You can try. Long Xie immediately shook his head. He felt that Wang Feng was tricking him. I don't believe it. It's a little strange. Long Xie continued watching. He wasn't the only one who didn't believe it. Many Douluo heavenly kings were shocked. They couldn't believe it. End of chapter. Chapter 13-14. The little Kuan shark was completely uninhabited in the city of the dream realm. The various attacks launched by the giant were all dodged by the little Kuan shark, as if it had predicted them in advance. In fact, he could even dodge the real attack among the many attacks. To be able to do this in someone else's dream world was simply bizarre. Especially when this was a 1,000-year soul beast. Star Spirit, what's going on? Didn't you say that only by forcefully withstanding it or by having a spiritual power far stronger than Renyuha can we break through? What's going on with this soul beast? The Douluo heavenly kings were surprised. Even Long Xie, who was stronger than the little Kuan shark, was useless. This 1,000-year soul beast seemed to have unlocked some kind of shackle, and its strength had changed drastically? It was completely unaffected? Heavenly King Star Spirit pondered for a few seconds, his eyes flickering as he said, I understand. I didn't expect there to be such a method. There was a rare fluctuation in her tone, and she was also very surprised. Wonderful! Wonderful! Awesome! Heavenly King Star Spirit thought for a few seconds and sighed. Star Spirit, don't keep us in suspense. Heavenly King Nan Yuan said unhappily. What's going on? I think that Renyuha is about to lose. He was indeed about to lose. From the strength of the giant's attack, Renyuha had already expended a lot of soul power. But he was unable to attack that 1,000-year soul beast. However, the Douluo heavenly kings were not proficient in spiritual power. They couldn't understand what was going on. Releasing your martial soul true body in the dream city and pulling the enemy into your dream, it's basically impossible for the enemy to escape. Like I said, unless your spiritual power far surpasses your opponent. Heavenly King Star Spirit explained. In the dream, the enemy's spirit will be constantly disturbed and affected. This has nothing to do with soul power. Even if it's a titled Douluo, as long as his spiritual power hasn't reached a certain level and can forcefully break out of this dream city, he will always be disturbed. Because one's spirit won't stop. As long as one's spirit doesn't stop, they will always be affected by the dream. And once it stops, it means that the soul also stops. The person will stop and lose their ability to think. So, I said that there are only two ways to break through. At this point, the Star Spirit Heavenly King paused. The Douluo Heavenly Kings nodded. Of course, it was impossible for the human mind to stop working. However, there is one situation. Our minds will automatically enter hibernation, but our bodies will remain active. The Star Spirit Heavenly King continued. The Douluo Heavenly Kings were stunned. Are you talking about sleep? The Shi Douluo asked. Not bad. It's not just a normal sleep, it's a deep sleep of the mind. Heavenly King Star Spirit said slowly, when we sleep like this, our minds will enter hibernation. Renyuha's dream city can interfere with the minds of the enemies in the dream, but it can't interfere with the sleeping enemies inside. But after entering deep sleep, the little soul beast won't be able to fight even if it's not affected by anyone's spiritual influence. Not to mention, he was able to dodge so many attacks. Heavenly King Nan Yuan was confused. Talent. Heavenly King Star Spirit pondered and said, "This soul beast might have treated Renyuha as an imaginary enemy in the dream realm and even entered a dream realm. And in his own dream, he was fighting with Renyuha. To be able to subconsciously control one's body in battle was a very special talent. Most of them are nurtured and trained, and very few are born naturally. Since it's his soul-bonded beast, it's not surprising that it has this talent. It's just that this method is very ingenious." At this point, Heavenly King Star Spirit seemed to have thought of something and found it rather funny. If Renyuha was a different type of soul sage, that little soul beast wouldn't have a chance to defeat him. But who would have thought that the mouse would meet the cat? That little soul beast couldn't defeat other soul sages, but it could defeat him. The more Heavenly King Star Spirit thought about it, the funnier he found it. All martial souls in the world complement and counter each other. This Dream City martial soul is enough to defeat a titled Douluo, but it was broken by a 1,000-year soul beast. This is the most exciting thing in the world. The Douluo Heavenly King sighed. There's no such thing as an invincible martial soul in the world. There's always a higher mountain. This isn't just about martial souls, but many things. Douluo shook his head slightly. The few of them stood at the peak of the Federation, but they never expected such a situation to happen. Renyuha didn't last long. He never expected this situation with the little Kuan shark. The strength of the Dream City martial soul had already allowed him to predict many situations, but he still didn't expect this to happen. A dream within a dream was completely unaffected by the Dream City. Even though he had cultivated for decades, he didn't know how to deal with such a situation. If it was an enemy, he had more or less encountered them. The most powerful person he had encountered was someone who could see through the flaws of his martial soul, but was still defeated by his schemes. But this time, it wasn't like when he defeated his enemies before. He was caught off guard. Renyuha's rhythm is messed up, and so is his heart. Heavenly King Star Spirit shook his head slightly. For such a situation to occur in his own dream city means that the flaws in his heart are completely exposed, just as Heavenly King Star Spirit had expected. In just a moment, the giant collapsed, and the dream city began to truly collapse. Even the little Kuan shark didn't find the flaws in Renyuha's heart hidden in this dream city. It was already impossible. Wang Feng felt that he had overestimated Renyuha. He thought that he could still struggle a little. Humans are always afraid of the unknown. Wang Feng could only shrug helplessly. From Renyuha's point of view, he couldn't understand the little Kuan shark situation, which extended to fear. One had to know that this was her own spiritual world. If she was afraid, this dream world would collapse on its own. This Renyuha probably hasn't experienced many real battles. Wang Feng was very sure of this. The real battles that Wang Feng was talking about were those that had experienced life and death battles. This was because soul masters who had experienced those battles had extremely strong willpower. Even if they were facing the unknown, they would feel fear, but they would never retreat. Instead, they would adapt. Renyuha seemed to have rich battle experience. Unfortunately, not having experienced that kind of battle was a huge flaw for a spiritual-type soul master. Following the collapse of the Dream City, in an instant, the grotesque and variegated surroundings shattered like a dream bubble. The surrounding scene began to return to the arena. On the opposite side, only Renyuha's face was extremely pale. Impossible! Impossible! Renyuha looked at Wang Feng and muttered. He walked towards Wang Feng. His gaze landed on the little Kuan shark, and in an instant, he seemed to understand something. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning. End of this chapter. Chapter 13-15. Was he sleeping just now? Renyuha stared at little Kuan Shark as if he was in a daze. As you can see, Wang Feng replied. Human Soul Master, you're not good enough. You can't even beat me. Fortunately, I didn't use my full strength just now. Otherwise, your family would have to bury your corpse. Long Xie pretended to be arrogant. Renyuha didn't say anything. After handing over his number plate, he turned around and left without saying a word. He didn't say anything harsh either. He still had the manners of a sex successor. At this moment, little Kuan Shark woke up. He looked around blankly and asked, Boss, what happened just now? And why did the match end? After that, his gaze landed on Long Xie. He seemed to have heard the latter half of Long Xie's sentence. He was puzzled. Brother Long, did you defeat that human soul master just now? Long Xie. No matter how thick-skinned he was too embarrassed to admit it. What dream did you have just now? Wang Feng asked. Little Kuan Shark was excited when he heard this. I dreamt that I was fighting that giant, but he couldn't hit me no matter how hard he tried. Then, that human soul master couldn't do anything to me. He transformed into many terrifying monsters to attack me, but it was useless. That was my dream. Boss, that was a great dream. I really hope that my dream will come true. Wang Feng laughed when he heard this. After that, he walked off the stage. This little guy has an incredible talent. Long Xie sighed. But no matter what, this match was over. In terms of time, this was the longest match that Wang Feng had ever fought. It was also the most ingenious match he had ever won. Little Kuan Shark relied on his own abilities to win this match. To him, this was a huge improvement. Furthermore, he had comprehended this special skill. Dream entry. Although Renyuha was a spiritual-type soul master, and this skill wasn't very useful, it was very crucial in certain situations. After this match ended, Wang Feng realized that this was the last match of the 8th round. No wonder Renyuha was afraid. He had fought for so long. Following this, Ren Qianxing from the Idealism sect was very principled. He immediately handed over his sect's cultivation method. The Shi Douluo immediately told Wang Feng about this cultivation method. There were no physical records of this kind of cultivation method in the past. In order to maintain confidentiality, it was passed down by word of mouth. It was just that there was a huge drawback to spreading it by word of mouth. After Soul Tools appeared in the Federation, the Idealism sect made use of special arrays in Soul Tools and supplemented them with spiritual techniques to hide the cultivation method in a special Soul Tool. Only a special spiritual technique from the Idealism sect could be undone from such a Soul Tool. This Soul Tool was called a Spirit Mirror. It looked like a compass about the size of a palm. By injecting his spirit power into it and unlocking the formation seal on the spirit mirror, the Idealism sect's spirit cultivation method would automatically appear. This thing looked a little advanced. It was a bit like the jade slips in Wang Feng's memories from his previous life. Unfortunately, its storage capacity was low. After opening the spirit mirror, the Idealism sect's spirit cultivation method appeared. It was similar to Wang Feng's spirit strength and appeared in his mind. After Wang Feng learned of this spirit cultivation method, he was rather amazed. Idealism sect. From the name of the sect, one could tell a thing or two. Idealism sect believed that the heart was oneself, the heart was the soul, and the heart was everything. The reverse was also true. Idealism was supreme. Of course, the idealism here was different from the idealism in Wang Feng's previous life. However, the cultivation method was not a simple cultivation method. It was an act. Simply put, the Idealism sect believed that if one wanted to cultivate spiritual power, then one had to cultivate the heart. In that case, he had to cultivate his heart. Cultivating the heart could not only increase one's spiritual power, but also improve all aspects of the soul master. The cultivation here was a kind of quiet recuperation. In the Idealism sect's cultivation method, It was clearly stated that the heart could be everything. However, because it was everything, soul masters could easily lose their hearts. Once lost, not to mention increasing one's spiritual power, it would be a good thing if it did not decline. Therefore, one had to recuperate. When one's mind was emptied, one would be ignorant and reach the mental state of a newborn child and enter a special entranced state. Then, one would be able to cultivate through one's martial soul and cultivation method. In Wang Feng's words, one had to enter the state of a sage and empty oneself. It sounded simple. However, in reality, it was not easy to do. In the state of a sage, he could not have any distracting thoughts. It was fine when one was young. One did not have much experience and had no distracting thoughts. It was easier to cultivate. However, once one cultivated to the end and experienced reality, how could there be no distracting thoughts? Therefore, the more one cultivated, the harder it was to increase one's spiritual power. In addition, this theory would also affect the normal meditation and cultivation of soul power. In the end, one's cultivation level would be extremely slow and there would be bottleneck. Therefore, the people of the idealism sect would find it difficult to improve after reaching rank 80. This sage state is not something one can enter just by charging. Wang Feng shook his head. Moreover, there were strict requirements for one's martial soul. Even in this state, if one did not have a spiritual type martial soul, cultivation would be extremely slow. Only by meeting these 2 points would the idealism sect's spiritual cultivation method be effective. How difficult was it? In theory, there was nothing wrong with the starting point of the idealism sect. In the sage mode, one's mind was free of distracting thoughts. Cultivating it would be half the result with twice the effort, especially for increasing one's spiritual power. Unfortunately, it was not so easy to enter. It was because of this cultivation method that the people of the idealism sect rarely came out. This was because they felt that the more they saw, the more they experienced, and the more complicated their thoughts were, the harder it was to enter this state, and the cultivation efficiency was extremely low. It would only be slightly better when one cultivated to a higher rank. This was because the higher one's spiritual power, the stronger one's control over one's spirit and soul. After reading it, Wang Feng felt that this method could be considered a cultivation method, but the requirements were more stringent. Correspondingly, the improvement was also great. Therefore, the idealism sect was very strong. After all, as long as one was a spiritual type soul master, one would always encounter a few talented ones. Once they cultivated it, they would be very powerful. Their spiritual power generally far exceeded that of soul masters of the same rank. For example, Ren Yuhe was already comparable to a soul Douluo, and was even close to a titled Dalu. Whether it was the method or the cultivation method, there were effects. However, like the purple demon eyes, this cultivation method had obvious drawbacks. The purple demon eyes had a high requirement for comprehension, and one could only cultivate it in the morning. If one did not have a fortuitous encounter, one could forget about achieving small success every few decades. Little Three had encountered countless fortuitous encounters to cultivate the purple demon eyes to greater success at a young age. It was not suitable for most soul masters. It's not difficult to change this cultivation method. Wang Feng pondered. End of chapter. Chapter 13-16. The key was, how could he change it to make it more suitable for the current soul masters? Speaking of which, this cultivation method was the opposite of the front secret word. The front secret word was especially complicated. It emphasized observing the universe, the sun, and the moon. From there, one could deduce the changes and improve one's primordial spirit, which was the soul. At the same time, because one could deduce all kinds of changes, they could predict certain things in advance. The prerequisite was that one's spiritual power was strong enough. Therefore, when Wang Feng was cultivating, he spent half a year traveling the continent, looking at every corner and understanding the changes in the world. Not only did he not calm down, but he also wandered around. However, Wang Feng had already been tempered by the red lotus karmic fire, and had a dustless glass body. His soul had reached a high level. It would not be affected by the outside world. Wang Feng had already met the cultivation method and requirements mentioned by the idealism sect. This was why he could quickly cultivate the front secret word. After thinking for a night, Wang Feng vaguely had a clue, but he felt that he had not completely grasped it. It was obviously impossible for ordinary soul masters to be like Wang Feng. The idealism sect's method was also difficult. Actually, normal soul masters will slowly increase their spiritual power. Apart from increasing their soul power, meditation is also a kind of spiritual cultivation. Wang Feng looked at the rising sun outside the window. Therefore, a soul master's spiritual power would increase as their cultivation increased. It was just that this kind of cultivation was slower. Unfortunately, this kind of cultivation speed was too slow. Furthermore, soul masters did not know the strength of their spiritual power. Even the Federation could not unify it. I feel like I'm missing something. Wang Feng shook his head and walked out of the hotel. Today was the 9th round and the first match of the youth group semi-finals. There were a total of 2 matches. There were only about 200 people left in the summit group competition. After yesterday's 8th round, half of them were eliminated. Wang Feng did not plan to modify the cultivation method in one night. It was not that exaggerated. Before the summit group competition, Wang Feng estimated that he would be able to modify it before leaving Martial Spirit City. The 9th round of the competition was still lively. The first semi-final match in the morning was between the Shrek Academy and another academy. But this time, they might have been affected by the previous match. Shrek did not plan to hide much. They directly brought out Ma Xiaotao and defeated their opponent with brute strength. Ma Xiaotao was a rank 60 soul emperor, and she had the help of a 10,000-year soul beast, the Ice Fox. She also cultivated the power of ice. The combination of the two could be said to be a combination of ice and fire. No soul master was a match for her. Even if they couldn't wipe out an entire team, with Huo Yuhao and the others, these teams wouldn't be a match for them. And Shrek's final opponent was naturally the Ace team from East Maple Academy. The East Maple Academy was an academy established by the Federation, so there was no need to doubt its strength. Moreover, he walked the orthodox path of the king. The so-called Way of the Monarch was one of those schools that had an extremely high upper limit and an extremely low lower limit. It had been passed down for a long time, flourishing 10,000 years ago. Even now, it still hadn't declined. 2 for offense and defense, 1 for agility heal, and 2 for control. This style had no flaws. It had damage output, control, and recovery. It had everything. This was the reason why it could be passed down. However, not many academies used it. It was precisely because it had everything that it was not strong at all. Not enough damage, not enough crowd control, not enough recovery compared to the limits brought about by all sorts of bizarre factions. The Way of the Monarch was often crushed by them. The prerequisite was that the 7 people in the Way of the Monarch were sufficiently outstanding and strong. This kind of lineup would undergo a qualitative change. This was why it had a high upper limit. And the 7 people from East Maple Academy happened to be 7 extremely strong and outstanding soul masters. All along, the East Maple Academy had only promoted this style as the Federation's academy. It represented the Way of the Monarch. It just didn't deny the other schools. When the 7 of them were extremely strong, this kind of lineup would be invulnerable. The enemy wouldn't be able to find any flaws. Only the Way of the Monarch could truly defeat this kind of ultimate Way of the Monarch. Wang Feng looked at the 7 people from East Maple Academy. It had to be said that these 7 people were very strong. They were all rank 55 and above. Their average age was 20 years old. Although their talents couldn't be compared to Ma Xiaotao and Zhang Lishuan, they were still monstrous. The key was that their martial souls were very strong. They were so strong that they weren't inferior to Ma Xiaotao and Wang Dong, who had top-tier martial souls. The four people with dual offensive and defensive martial souls had an elemental martial soul, heavy water, which represented elemental attack. They had a beast martial soul, berserker, which represented physical attack. They had the sighing wall, which was inclined towards single-target defense, and the exquisite jade barrier, which was all defense. One of them had an agility-type martial soul, white shadow, which represented agility-type martial souls, and the angel's scepter, which represented healing-type martial souls. One of them was a spiritual-type control-type soul master, whose martial soul was unknown. The other was also a control-type martial soul, but it wasn't a spiritual-type martial soul. It was a very strong control-type martial soul, thousand illusionary octopus. These martial souls were all famous martial souls. They were all at the top of their respective faculties, outstanding figures. In detail, their origins couldn't be compared to ordinary martial souls. The Federation's academy naturally didn't lack geniuses. The Spirit Mandate Pavilion's pavilion master was even the Shi Douluo, who was worshipped by countless soul masters in the Federation. Just this reputation alone was enough to attract countless soul masters to join East Maple Academy. According to Wang Feng's estimation, it was basically impossible for Huo Yuhao to defeat these 7 people. Even a soul contract master wouldn't be able to make up for such a huge gap in soul power. With Ma Xiaotao's strength, even if she could fight against 4 people, the other 3 would be enough to defeat Huo Yuhao and the others. Unless they go easy on her, Wang Feng shook his head. Ma Xiaotao's appearance caused Team Shrek to gain another wave of popularity. Especially that dazzling ice fox. The strength of a 10,000-year soul contract beast was unquestionable. The life soul contract gave 4 soul skills, each of which was incomparably powerful. In addition, the attributes of the ice fox and Ma Xiaotao repelled each other. When they suppressed each other because of their martial souls, there was a subtle change. This made the power of Ma Xiaotao's soul skills very terrifying. Compared to the others, she was on a completely different level. After all, her soul power detection was there. After watching Ma Xiaotao's match, Wang Feng was suddenly a little curious. He remembered that when he woke up, Qin Yu said that Qin Yu and the Ice Emperor seemed to have found a fire-type soul beast as Qin Yu's second soul contract beast. Furthermore, its attributes were the opposite of Qin Yu's. Thus, the green jade was able to achieve the effects of 2 polarities. It sounded very terrifying. After the youth group tournament, it was the summit tournament, and this time Wang Feng won very easily. It was the easiest match in the summit tournament. His opponent was a soul Douluo, and he directly admitted defeat without any conditions. He was very self-conscious, but Wang Feng felt a little regretful. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.